Yes.
Okay, welcome everyone to our January 2025 Housing Commission meeting. The first item on the agenda, since I do not believe we have any public comment, of the notes from our December meeting. Any edits or changes to the notes? Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion. Second.
No objection. Okay, they're approved. Thank you very much. And then next up on our agenda, we have a presentation from Tiffany Johnson from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office, and she's a director of the Fair Housing Assistance Program. So, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Johnson. I'm the director of the Fair Housing Assistance Program. Are you all familiar with the program? Okay, so I get to captivate you with a cool program. We are a program that is approximately $26 million that we give to state and local governments for investigating Fair Housing Act violations. Obviously, there are 7 protected classes that we cover, but some of our jurisdictions cover others. But we are a program that is meant to help you and assist you by providing additional funds for you to investigate these claims. We have approximately 76 local governments and states in the program now. And so it's based on Congress what our allocation is. But once you are deemed having a law that is substantially equivalent to our fair housing laws, then we can enter you into the program. And unlike other programs where year over year you're having to reapply, it's a cooperative agreement, meaning we're just going to give you whatever you deserve. Right? And we sort of do it on a pro rata basis, or like looking back. So if you investigate, let's say, 100 claims of Fair Housing Act violations, then we will pay you for those investigations. Right now, it's roughly $3,000 a case. And there are some that obviously get more if it goes to a higher level. This isn't something that is going to take the place of what you're already doing. So if you already have funds dedicated to this, this is just meant to be like additional funds that are helpful. It's also meant to provide guidance to landlords and tenants on what their expectations are for both parties through education and outreach. So that's a little bit about what we do. I think that I was brought here in thought that maybe you guys might be interested in joining the program. And if you are, what your questions might be, you're getting answered. I can tell you that it probably takes about 6 months to join in, just because we would engage with you all on what it might look like, what your law is, if it meets our threshold for substantial equivalency. We obviously have to check that through the Office of General Counsel, and then it would have to be approved by our Assistant Secretary. Candidly, there were some last-minute entrants before the change in administration because we don't know what it's likely to be. But I know from my vantage point and from the vantage point of my Deputy Assistant Secretary, we have a strong commitment to this program, and a strong commitment to, ensuring that fair housing is still at the forefront. So happy to answer any questions. I know that's like the quick intro. I could bore you with slides, but I think that's the moose boosh, like the to get the palate wet about this.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. And we also have staff, Gurjeet and Anna, who are with our Office of Human Rights in Arlington. And so they run our fair housing enforcement, currently. And so it'd be their office that would be, um, working with HUD to become a fair housing assistance program. So the county board, in 2023 adopted a fair housing plan, for the region, but we also had specific goals for Arlington. One of those was changing our ordinance, our human rights ordinance, to make it consistent, and substantially equivalent with, federal fair housing law as well as Virginia fair housing law, as well as to explore becoming a fair housing assistance program. So I think the hope was tonight to, have a public discussion about what that looks like, um, and answer any questions that, our commission has. Certainly if staff has any questions as well. I know it'd be helpful if you can talk a little bit more about, like, what does that path look like? So I know first step is changing the ordinance. So housing opportunities made equal in Virginia, partnered with our local, like Arlington NAACP branch, to review the human rights ordinance in Arlington and make a series of recommendations in December on this is how we think it should change, in order to be substantially equivalent and also consistent with Virginia fair housing law. So assuming that happens, assuming that HUD signs off and says, yes, this is substantially equivalent, can you walk us through like what sort of training resources or what happens to make sure that, the locality, in this case Arlington, would be able to, handle the caseload and sort of work in a way that's consistent with HUD, and their investigation processes?
I would also point you to your neighbor Fairfax because they're already, have that status. So look at what their law is. Don't reinvent the wheel. A lot of times, counties and states try to do something from scratch when there are models that you could do. So I would implore you to look at that. The hardest threshold is making sure that you're substantially the paperwork. Otherwise, it's not that difficult. And usually there's back and forth between my office and OGC. Series of months. That's why I said it usually takes about 6 months. And the hardest part, I think, is getting in front of. Usually, it's not just your housing commission, but your actual city council that has to make.
Yeah, we're just advisory, so
Yeah.
we make recommendations, but have no authority to.
So that's always the hardest thing is getting on their agenda. And that's, again, usually why it takes the time frame it does. Candidly, I am brand new to the position, started in April. And one of the things that I noticed is that we lack a comprehensive process that I think is helpful for new facts. And just so you can get a little bit of alignment, there are two sort of funds that exist. One fund is called capacity building, and that is where you all would be. And it's for a 3-year period where I just give you a sort of a blanket amount of dollars. It's up to 160,000. And that's really for you all to sort of lay the groundwork, get your staffing levels where they need to, build a relationship with a regional office, regional fair housing office, at the federal level so that you guys can really understand what the parameters are of the program. After you successfully complete your capacity building of 3 years, then you come on as a fully sort of vested agency, which we are like line iteming you in every year to get a certain amount of funds. So we'll do the 3 years. It's also a great look at how many cases do you actually get, right? So that we can sort of prorate out and think through, in Arlington, we're seeing on average 200 cases per year. So we would know the budget.
I have other questions, sort of less related to that process. But if other people have questions about that, happy to entertain those first.
So besides Fairfax, do you know other jurisdictions close by? Like the city of Alexandria? No.
That's the only one. in
Oh,
Virginia,
only one in Virginia.
Other than the state office of fair.
Okay.
I know that you all have another jurisdiction that is like trying so hard, and we're in process with them and hoping that they can get their paperwork to me super quickly. But there's another one that is.
Shots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright. So, but, you know, that isn't a deterrent for us, but just means there's an opportunity. We should have these conversations.
DC, DC's at that, right? Yeah. And I imagine Maryland's has a few, yeah. One of the things that we've seen in Arlington is that there's a disconnect between, I think it's really people don't understand fair housing law. They don't recognize when they've been discriminated against. I mean, they kind of sense that they do, but they don't know what is the process to report it. And they're also often, I think, afraid to report it of retaliation. That's a big thing that we see. Have you seen successes or, FAPs to go out in the community and help people better understand, like, how to bring cases, like when you actually experience discrimination or when you see your neighbor being discriminated against? Is it, as a housing advocate, I hear cases all the time. I mean, I see people will post on Facebook groups about, like, I applied for an apartment and they said they couldn't rent to me because I didn't have a US passport. And it's like, that's illegal. It's a violation of fair housing law. But they don't understand that, and they don't understand what the process is to do anything about it. And so I think our caseload in Arlington is, and we'll hear more about that later, generally quite low. But I feel like from being out in the community, it seems like there is a lot of discrimination happening. It just doesn't get reported. It doesn't go through the process.
So this is something that I think that is happening across the country. I would point to a small jurisdiction that I think has successfully sort of cracked the nut on what you're talking about. And it's Cambridge, Massachusetts. So again, super small. You wouldn't think that it would have a bunch of violations, but it does because it's a densely populated area, largely populated by Harvard students. But then you also have a demographic of folks that are immigrants, working class, that are also trying to get housing. And so you have this sort of push-pull conflict. And what Cambridge has done so successfully, and I really, I had a meeting with the director. What she did is had a targeted campaign on what fair housing violations were. She did them in English and in Spanish, and really sort of showcased to the population what the issues were. And I think that that's been super successful, and then converting that to cases. And so, for it to be such a small agency, they're pushing out just as many, like, per, capita are pushing out just as many as the big dogs are. So,
Do you know, are they working closely with FIPS, or are they just kind of going alone, or?
they're kind of going at it alone. I mean, I don't think that they've necessarily, jurisdictionally, there may be a fit close by, but again, because it's such a small place, you also have the larger state FAP and the Boston FAP that is there, but they're killing it. So
Is there a local match requirement or not at all, or preference?
there is a match requirement. It's not 1-to-1. I think it's 10%.
Do you see FAPs taking on like fair lending cases as well, or appraisal bias, and like, okay.
Yeah.
Um,
And especially, I know that that's an issue here in Arlington.
how is that,
Find something.
Right,
If I
that's,
can-
is,
many of my friends that lived in Arlington and really loved it
Yeah.
have had to go to other places, Maryland or DC, because they just can't find inventory.
once, once a jurisdiction is either interested in becoming a fair housing assistance program, or it does become one, does that open up training resources from HUD on like, okay, this is how you would actually do a appraisal bias, like investigation, or like redlining or something, okay?
So there is a whole National Fair Housing Training Academy that is specifically designed and designated for our agencies that are either fair housing assistance programs or fair housing initiatives programs, FIPS or FAPS. In addition, that is something that I am taking on as the director. I really think I've got to bridge the gap in what the knowledge sort of deficiencies are. Candidly, we see a high turnover in FIPS and FAPS, just because, you know, these aren't necessarily the highest wages. And can be difficult work in that you are literally hearing about someone's worst days. You know, and so people that are committed, stay committed and do the work for 20, 30 years. But sometimes other folks find greener pastures and make more money, and I understand that. But I would like to build out a legacy of having training and curriculum that allows folks to trip out, but new folks can come in and sort of take the banner by having trainings that are comprehensive.
Yeah, if a local jurisdiction expands the protected class, are they part of those two, or is it seven?
So for us to have dual filings, it would just be the 7. But there are other things outside of that you all can still look at, right? So one of the big ones is source of income. Right? Yeah, so we don't have that as a protected class, but usually with source of income, we often see familial status, race or national origin, like it goes sort of hand in hand.
So with the new administration, do you have any sense of like if the funding is gonna stay the same or other cuts, but it's.
Crystal ball, that you,
No, I don't. Traditionally, because it's state and local governments, we've been at stagnant levels, but not dramatic cuts. We're hoping that we will still be in that field, but it also is going to be like a requirement that our FIP and FAP partners evangelize for us with their local congress.
I'm a little bit biased. I was on the Hill working for the authorizing committee when FAP was created in 1987, so I'm a little bit biased. And I'll also speak politically based on my experience that I think with the sensitivity, and I also worked for the National Association of Realtors for 18 years, and they're a strong partner on fair housing after their 111-year sordid history. So I would say, my sense is the FIP and FAP will prevail. They were created in 87. Scott Turner today, you probably all saw that the incoming HUD secretary designee is obviously, I think, committed to fair housing. So I think it will survive. I'm glad that you brought them in here because I think it's something the county should do. Fair housing and source of income is a big issue. And on the rental side, and I can talk about the rental side later, with our rental stabilization study, et cetera, source of income is probably the biggest reason why landlords are not using the program. And it isn't because it's because they don't want to use, they do not like the HUD program, because the HUD program is burdensome, et cetera. And this is why we got to really clean up the HUD program because the utilization rates are woefully low. But we can talk about that later. But I strongly recommend that the county staff is listening to this or whatever, that the county partake in this. My sense is the program will at least live with level funding of what you got last year. What was it, 75 million? What was last year?
No, we got 26.4 million.
And FIP and FAP is at the same level?
No, FIP has a lot.
They do?
They
Okay.
have like 56 million. But just candidly, one of the things that has been an issue is that we return a lot of money.
Right.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
we're not doing that.
Okay, so that's another reason, it's utilization. That's another reason if they can show more demand and if we go in for demand. And, you know, we do have two good members of, between our Senate delegation and our congressional delegation. They'd always look out first there, et cetera. So I really think it's worth it. I also think it's worth tying in the Northern Virginia Board of Realtors who are also committed to this stuff. So I think it's a good thing. And especially with scarce resources and stuff like that. People that aren't getting assistance for these discriminatory reasons really should be evaporated.
Also, just looking at the timeline, let's say like tonight, say we want to go forward for a recommendation, looking at what, 6 months to become certified, right? And then once we are certain.
After they change
Equivalent.
the ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah, so the ordinance is the first step before you can even basically talk to HUD, right?
You can talk to me right now,
Right,
obviously,
yeah.
but, yeah. And this is the thing, I'm giving you the sort of game plan. Look at Fairfax, look at what Charlottesville is already, or is proposing to send forward. They've done, follow that model, and that can like alleviate a lot of time for you. And just candidly, time is of the essence, right? If you could get it to me, say sooner rather than later, I'm in a better position. I don't know what the future holds.
And just thought, so let's say we want to initiate to become substantially equivalent. Is that just, could we use like, maybe existing resources, or is that like, we need to fund that in the budget to provide like whatever that like, it is just, okay, wait, make sure we have enough money to make sure we have dedicated staff to get this in order, and then boom, then we'll get the matches later.
So the first part is the ordinance. The second part is really aligning your budget and your office structure to, and you'll do that in your ordinance, right? And whatever you decide as the way you want to set up the office. Sounds like you guys already have a framework. I don't know if you already have investigators. So you got like half the way, you're half the way there, So I don't necessarily think it'll be as heavy of a lift as some folks who are coming in brand new, green, don't have any of that.
Do you know, do most apps or localities, are they just doing fair housing, or like in Arlington, the Office of Human Rights does fair housing enforcement, they do employment discrimination, and they do like public accommodation, discrimination. Is that pretty typical?
It's very typical. The thing that I would say is one of the challenges though, is that you have dedicated housing staff that understand the fair housing laws. One of the challenges is when they have investigators doing all three types of cases, you're never good at it. And there's a nuance to all of these in bringing forth cause cases or recognizing when they're not.
Okay. Other questions, comments, anything from folks online? Okay. Margaret, did you have anything? Okay, just wanted to show us your face. Good to see you. Okay, I think those are most of the questions that I had. It sounds like the commission has You're welcome to stick around if you want. We do have a briefing from our Office of Human Rights on their fair housing enforcement up next.
I'll stay for that.
Okay. Sounds good. But yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to come out here tonight and answer our questions and help us understand better how the program works. I'm super excited about the prospect of Arlington becoming a fair housing assistance program, and I hope that staff and the board do ultimately decide to take that step. And I think after the presentation from the Office of Human Rights, we'll have an action item to vote on a recommendation around that. So thank you very much.
Thank you all, and truly, if you all need anything, have any other questions, feel free to reach out. I am committed to this program and the great work that it can be done with it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Gurjeet, who is the, I think, Assistant County Manager for Human Rights and Equal Opportunity. If I got that, your title correct?
Pretty much. Yeah, Assistant County Manager for Human Rights, EEO, and ADA.
There we go.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Happy New Year to all of you. It's great to finally be here and chat with you about all this. We're super excited about the housing testing we're doing and all the work we're doing. And Kellen, I got your bullets that you had asked, so I was going to go through them. But before I do that, I did want to share that Anna Maynard is from our office is here with me as well. And a little bit, I'm not sure how familiar the commission is with me because you may know some folks that have been in this position before. I don't think I've been with presented to the housing commission before. So I came on board in 2018. My background is employment law, employment discrimination. And I've been here at the county since in this position. My other hat is director of the Office of Human Rights. I'm very, very fortunate that we have Anna Maynard on our team who's been with the county longer and has so much more organizational, institutional knowledge, and is basically pivotal to our work. So she'll be sharing some information with you as well. One of the first things you asked, Helen, was just to give you an overview of the office. So we sit within the county manager's office, and we have kind of essentially two functions. We have an outward facing external function with the community. We have a role in that, and then our internal. And as you all know, we're set up in part of our duties come from the Human Rights Ordinance, which was recently updated to include SOI discrimination. And the ordinance covers discrimination in various areas, not just employment, but housing, credit, education, others. Most of our complaints, however, do fall within the employment context. So that covers folks in the community and anyone that kind of goes through Arlington, works, plays here. It does not cover our internal employees, as some of you may know. Those employees typically, they can go to the EOC if they have complaints, or they can come to us, and that's our internal function, and file complaints under admin reg, and our EEO policy. So we handle EEO investigations and just discrimination investigations under our ordinance externally, and then internally for our applicants and employees under our AR, our regs, and our EEO policy. And then we also cover accommodations, right? So we facilitate accommodations for applicants and employees. And we do a myriad of other things that probably maybe some community members may not know about, but examples include, for example, the barrier analysis we did, special projects like that, the annual affirmative action plan we do, that comes out of our office. That's an internal role. And then, we're also involved in kind of advising on some of the racial equity stuff that we're doing internally, and as far as it concerns employees and applicants. So as far as, I think you had also asked, I will quickly say you had asked about, the role of the county attorney and the overview for that. I'm not going to speak for the county attorney's office, so I'll just put that out there. I think they're probably in a better position to give you a clearer picture of their role in terms of what they do and when they get involved with us. They're typically not involved in the work we do in terms of, the investigations we do under the ordinance, whether they're housing, employment, or anything else. And then as far as complaints, housing complaints, as you alluded to earlier, we really don't get that many. And this is it's typically employment is our biggest biggest area. So out of, let's say, I think we get about maybe, I want to say, if I'm thinking correctly, 14% of all complaints, if I did the math right, are housing. So in the last 4 years, for example, we had roughly, I want to say 20 housing complaints we accepted. One, delineation I will make is that if those are accepted, that does not mean that that's the, we're not getting calls about some issue related to housing that say we have to refer to another, refer to someone else, or it's not in the right place. We can only take what's under our ordinance. So if someone calls up about a neighbor dispute, for example, right, they're not getting along with their neighbor. We get all sorts of calls. That's not something we would take. So what I wanted to just make clear is it's not that we only had 20 different cases call us over 4 years. We had probably far in excess of that, and I don't have the number on hand in terms of inquiries. But out of that, the ones that were accepted were roughly about 20. And typically it's based on disability. That's not inconsistent with what you see in some of the reports that come out, right? Disability is a major one. So that's essentially the ballpark of the complaints we get. And then I think, actually, I should stop there. Do you have questions about anything I've said so far before I move on to, I think your next bullet was about the report, but that's a rough overview of sort of what our office does and how, sort of general overview of how many complaints we get in the housing area that we've gotten since 2020 at least. And we're going to 2020 because prior to 2020, we were paper-based. And then in 2020, we moved to Teams and everything has been digitized since. So it's just a little easier to get those metrics for you. Anna, did I miss anything?
I think you got pretty much everything. Yeah.
Zach, you had a question.
Just on that last point, so roughly is 20 housing complaints over 4 years, is that pretty similar to what you had seen, if you're able to say with any sort of guess before 2020? Is that kind of in line with what you were saying?
Yeah, I've been here, as Gergie said, a long time. I'm not going to
Longer
say
than
how
me
long.
is what I meant.
Yeah, a long time. But that is pretty typical in what we see in terms of housing complaints. It's been about the same rate that we can accept under the ordinance.
Brian?
Just a quick question to kind of follow up on that. Do you have any insight on how that level of complaints compares regionally? So say comparing Arlington to Alexandria and Fairfax, is that kind of in line with what we see, or is that kind of anomalous?
I would say I don't have exact numbers on that, but just from our conversations and sort of relationships we have with other agencies like ours, it's about the same.
Go ahead, Jason.
And the complaints on disability, is that failing to provide accommodation, like for physical, is that what that mostly is about, or?
It is typically some sort of a failure to accommodate. I wouldn't say only physically. There's a lot of variety in the disability realm, and those are very individualized. But typically, they are in some manner or another failure to accommodate.
Gurjit, as you're talking about sort of the office structure, can you also tell us about sort of how many staff you have, kind of, do you have people who are dedicated to housing versus employment? Like what does that look like?
Right. So great question. Currently we have 3 people that we're not fully staffed. We have 2 vacancies. So 3 people would be me, Anna, who's dealing with all of our investigations in all 3 buckets. And that's something I failed to explain. So we have 3 buckets of investigations: internal, right? Those are all the county applicant employee; external under the ordinance. And then the 3rd bucket is we do have a work share with the EEOC that's been in place for quite some time, and we get investigations from them. So it's a large workload, particularly for one person. And so we have Anna is handling all of them, and then we have a disability resources coordinator, and she handles all the accommodations. So we have 2 vacancies for EEO investigators, or just investigators, basically OHR investigators. There is not a person dedicated only to housing, and we find that, just like with having to apply different theories of discrimination, whether it's harassment or disparate impact or basically anything, disparate treatment, that if you understand the theoretical framework, the law, and can apply or analytical and can apply facts to the law and know materiality and relevance, that you can essentially, anyone that's qualified to do that can do any of those. And as long as they can understand it. So we don't anticipate, you know, that if someone that couldn't, if we had that kind of a law that we covered with, say, national origin discrimination housing, for example, which our ordinance does not cover, that we would be able to handle that as well if we just had the staffing for that. Right now, what any investigator would be covering everything, so they wouldn't just be dedicated to housing. And the 2 FTEs we have, we are trying to fill those. We tried before, but as you all know, it's a bit of a rough spot in the labor market right now with getting folks coming in. So we're hopeful we'll get those filled soon, and then we would have 3 investigators.
And Gurjeet, for the 2 vacancies, if I seem to recall, haven't those been open or for a while now?
Oh, yes, they've been open. We've we've interviewed folks, it just didn't work out. They've been open for months and we've been recruiting. We've gone through several rounds and then it didn't work out. Then we went out again, didn't work out. And then I think we went out a third time, didn't work out. And then we're going out now. I believe it's going to be reposted on the 25th. So it's
Okay.
not for lack of trying.
But sorry, and I think my question was more because a couple years ago, when I was looking at like budgetary stuff around fair housing, I thought there were 2 vacancies as well. So is that just because people have turned over in those positions? Or basically my question is like, have we had those vacancies for several years, or we're just talking about a couple months that we've had the vacancies and there's just been some churn in staffing?
Oh, I think it's just been a few, I mean, if it's been less than a year, it's been several months. I think what you're talking about may have been during the pandemic when we had a vacancy and then it turned over, but we did hire someone after that.
Okay,
And then, yeah, so it wasn't, yeah.
thank you for the clarification.
I have a question. So typically, if someone were to call your office with a complaint of some sort, because I've had some people, because I do housing, homeownership, and I've had people call me and they said, I've been discriminated against, and I give you their phone number, and then I never hear from them. But I wonder, like, when somebody calls the office, like, how long does it take for the whole investigation process to go through?
So I think under the ordinance, we have 1 year to complete an investigation. We can ask the commission, the Human Rights Commission, for a 1 year extension. Now, we don't look at that as having 2 years. In fact, we prefer not to even look at it as having 1 year because we try to do them as quickly as we can. I can't give you a timeline, just sort of depends on the workload and what cases we have going on. So, for example, if we have one investigator that's doing all 40 to 60 cases and tomorrow morning we get a sexual harassment complaint from an employee, we're probably going to be prioritizing the sexual harassment complaint. And then some things may have to wait a few days. So it just depends. I can't give you an average, but if you have someone call, I think your question was a timeline, right? How long it would take. We have
I was wondering, because I never heard back from this person that was complaining about, she felt she was being discriminated. Well, she was actually renting a condo, and I think it was found that she did not have, I don't know what the right term is. She didn't have a fair complaint, or the complaint wasn't valid, actually, I think it was. But I,
No cause.
no, she had no cause, right, that's what it was, sorry.
Mhm.
But I was just curious because she kept on asking me, how long is it gonna take? And I was like, I don't know, call them. And so I guess that's probably, I don't want to commit anybody to a timeline.
Well, under right now, we'd have, basically we'd be looking at it as under a year if she filed today. And then if for any reason we couldn't get done within the year, then we'd have to ask the commission if they would approve a 1 year extension. So technically, you can get up to 2 years if the commission extends it. We'd hope it wouldn't take that long and we could wrap it up. But I can say, I mean, I don't know, Anna, if you can chime in, but I imagine it's going to not be like.
I mean,
Sorry.
it's not a year before anything happens. If somebody
Yeah.
reaches out to us, typically they either call or they submit our form online. We contact them. Our
Mhm.
practice is to try to do that within 3 to 5 business days. Schedule an appointment for an intake. If we can accept the complaint, then we draft the complaint and file it and proceed through the investigation. So it's not that they won't hear anything, but it may take several months to go through the investigative process. to get to a finding.
Gurjit, you talked about the Human Rights Commission. Can you talk a little bit about what is the role of the commission versus staff in like fair housing?
I mean, I think generally, so I'll speak I don't know about in terms of fair do you mean what's our role with fair housing, or
Yeah, so
the Human Rights Commission's role, or?
when it comes to like a fair housing complaint, what is the role of staff versus what is the role of the Human Rights Commission?
So I don't know about the role of the Human Rights Commission. I know if they've worked with, I think, the Housing Commission before. I know I think they've interacted with you on certain like SOI before. As far as staff, our role is, when we get a complaint, we review it to see if we can accept it, investigate it, and try to resolve it. That's the role of the Office of Human Rights staff. There's no independent sort of policing or enforcement role. That's, just like standalone in terms of surveying properties or testing them on our own, right? And seeing if something is not being handled well and then taking action or trying to find bad actors. There's not that affirmative kind of role for staff. It's more similar. It's basically the authority granted to us under the ordinance in terms of housing discrimination.
And so the Human Rights Commission doesn't have a role in that process? Or I
No,
thought.
no, right. Their role would be, they basically, so the way the ordinance is written, it says that they accept, investigate, conciliate cases, but essentially the way that they do it through us. So we're the body that does the work. So their role, for all intents and purposes, is when there's an appeal, they'll come together and they'll hear the appeal, and the standard is, why can't I think of the standard? It's an abuse of discretion.
Abuse of
standard.
discretion.
Yeah. So yeah, that's essentially that's kind of primarily their role. And then also in the past, they've done outreach, in terms of all kinds of whatever topic they want to talk about that year. Sometimes it could be one year I think they did an event on, I think immigration rights. We did an event on hate crimes. So they'll do outreach. And, under the ordinance, the ordinance has been amended since then, but their role, of course, is advisory to the board.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to get a sense of like where in the process the commission had a role versus, staff. Because I recognize like staff is doing the investigating, they're doing conciliation, they're finding whether there was cause or not, correct?
Yep.
Is there a role in the commission in looking at the finding of staff and sort of validating that or not? Or is that not part of the commission's role?
If there's an appeal,
Just, okay.
then just for an appeal. And then there are other, powers enumerated under the ordinance that the commission has. For example, they can, if there's a failure to conciliate, and they could potentially go to a public hearing, but they'd have to get, I think, board approval and I think also advisory guidance from CAO. Like everybody, the board, and I think CAO would have to come together and in on that. And I don't believe that's ever been done. I think they also, Anna, correct me if I'm wrong, they have they can get witnesses and subpoena and witnesses, and that's never been done before, but they do.
If they have a public hearing, yeah.
Yeah, if they have a public hearing. But they really only get involved in terms of our decisions when there's an appeal, to hear the appeal, yeah.
And so are you saying that, at least since you've been here, we don't do public hearings in Arlington? Is that?
I'm not saying we don't do public hearings. I'm saying as far as I've been here, the commission has not decided to do a public hearing in an area where something was not able to be conciliated.
Okay. And I think previous conversations that I've had with the Office of Human Rights around what happens with cases, either, dismissed or you have the conciliation process. And then if conciliation fails, in theory, you have I think it would have to go to the board to approve sending it to the county attorney's office for them to sue. But my understanding is that none of our cases actually go through that process to the board and then to the county attorney to actually become a lawsuit. So do all the ones where there is a finding of cause, are they all successfully conciliated then?
I mean,
Yeah,
Sorry, Anna, go
We've
ahead.
never had, I'm sorry, but we've never had a situation where we're not able to come to a settlement agreement between the parties, either before or after finding cause.
Thank you.
I have a question. So in terms of outreach to kind of catch those cases, in addition to just the, couple that actually, submit every year, but in order to catch more of those cases that maybe people are not reporting, what does the outreach look like? Is there like funding in staff time for outreach?
I mean, the outreach for all intents and purposes, since we are so small and since you guys saw that in terms of what I shared, our current staffing, and just generally overall office staffing, 5 FTEs, right, for the entire office, which includes me. A lot of the outreach historically, since I've been here, has been done by the Human Rights Commission. I don't know if it was done differently before me, Anna, but I think it's primarily working with the commission. I know they've done stuff at the fair every year. They've put on programs in the past, and also we do with that work share agreement we have with the EEOC, we do a joint activity of outreach with them once a year. So I think, I'm not sure what we did. I think last year we did it on the PFWA, the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act. But it's not specific to housing in terms of the work, right? It depends on whatever topic we come up with, which we do in conjunction with the EEOC and what they recommend, for example. I can't talk about, I'm not sure in terms of specifics. There's not a different budget in the office just for outreach, if that's also your question.
Okay.
Kirti, can you talk about fair housing testing?
Yeah, sure. So historically, we've done testing, I think every 2 years. When I came on board, we had a vendor that was doing it, that had been doing it for quite some time. If I recall correctly, probably at least a decade. But that contract was on its way of running out. And just after reviewing a lot of the reports, because I had just come in, so I looked at all the reports and I just thought, I was just curious to see if they were in line with best practices for testing, or if there were maybe more qualified vendors out there. Not that the one we were using was not qualified, but I was just curious about that because the reports didn't seem, to me, it didn't seem like they were very, very robust. So I was just curious to see what else was out there. Since that contract was ending, we decided we were going to put an RFP out to see if we could get folks to bid on this. And then the pandemic hit. So we ended up doing one report with that old vendor. And then before we could go out, the pandemic hit, and that just sort of stopped everything in its tracks, which is why you haven't seen testing done from the office in maybe I want to say 4 years. I think our last report was 2019 or 2020. And so then we did the RFP, and last year we procured a vendor. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with them, Equal Rights Center, right? They do a lot of this testing in the area, and that's her primary tool they use to, try to eradicate discrimination in housing and public accommodation. And so we ended up getting them, and they started in May of last year, and May 1st, I think, through August 31st was a testing window. And I have some information for you on the testing they did. We did the bases were source of funds, familial status, disability, national origin. They conducted 65 rental tests of housing providers, and the 65 tests covered 56 unique properties managed by 48 different housing providers. We have received a draft of the report. We have not published it yet, and I can get into more specifics once we do, but right now it's still under review. However, I can say at a very high level that we're still looking through some of the material, which seems to suggest that I think there may be some issues with 3 of the tests with source of income in terms of acceptance of vouchers, and maybe one of the tests with disability. So those seem to be the more of the prominent areas that showed up. And what we're really curious with, since this is a new vendor, is speaking to them more about, what they recommend for Arlington in terms of the specifics in terms of training. So they recommended training and further testing. So we have additional calls set up with them to see what that looks like in their eyes. Like, would they recommend which properties they recommend retesting? Are they saying a different approach altogether, testing more properties? And then what specific training they also recommend? Because I believe, if I'm not recalling incorrectly, that we've done training on at least SOI and some other areas before. So we'd love to see what material they're thinking of, and how frequent, who they're thinking of targeting. So those are calls we still have planned, but that's kind of a very high level of the testing that was done.
And Gurjeet, do you have a time estimate for when you think the final report may be released?
I don't have a time estimate. We're working as quickly as we can. Don't want to commit to a timeline and then not meet it, but right now I think we're still talking through it with the county manager and staff, but I'm hopeful in sometime in February.
Okay.
I'm hopeful, but that's just, don't quote me on that.
I know in the fair housing plan, that the board had adopted last year, one of the goals talked about doing fair housing testing every year. And I know Arlington historically had done it like every other year, and in the Arlington specific goals, it still talks about doing it every other year, but expanding the number or the categories that were tested, which it sounds like we did expand the category, because I think previously we only tested national origin and then race and ethnicity. And yeah, so good to hear that we expanded the categories, especially, source of income, because I know that there's a lot of challenges around Virginia with acceptance of vouchers and, people complying with the fair housing law. Is there any push to move to annual testing? Is that something that's been discussed? Because again, I know it's part of the regional goals to do annual testing. But I was curious if that's something that has come up in the office or something that you all are considering moving towards.
So that's actually one of the questions we're going to be discussing with Equal Rights Center, just to see how frequently they're recommending testing, because since it's a different vendor, they actually do things very differently than the old vendor we used to use. And interesting, you pointed out, the expanded areas of testing. It was interesting because when the old vendor, the one that we had when I came on board, we actually asked them what their recommendations were on who we should know, where we should test. And I remember specifically asking, why is it that we only often test on these particular bases? And the response is, well, that's best practice. And so clearly things have changed, because as you saw and just noted, we've expanded those bases, which is great. And something we hope to keep doing. And it's based on ERC's recommendation and their expertise. So I'm hoping we can get some more of that expertise. So I don't have an answer for you on whether there's a push, because we don't have a clear, I guess, recommendation from them on timeline. I would think nothing's off the table, but I also don't want to, these are conversations we haven't fully talked through with the county manager. So I think, we're waiting to see what they say in terms of how frequently they think we should be testing, particularly based on what they saw.
Okay, appreciate that. Yeah, I think, one of the things that surprised me with the previous testing was that especially disability was not included, knowing that nationally the vast majority of fair housing cases are around disability. So it seemed odd not to test for that, given that we know there's a lot of issues, at least reported issues, when it comes to that. And it seems like, given that we have 11 protected classes in Arlington, that if we're not testing for them, what's the incentive for a lot of the housing providers, especially on the rental side, to actually follow that? Because if they know no one is really paying attention, or no one is, if residents are ignorant of the law, and then even if they feel like they've been discriminated against, they don't know how to report it, they don't know what to do about it, or they fear retaliation. And then they also know that we're not going to test for it. It just seems like there's just not a lot of incentives for them to follow the law. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of, let's test. So I appreciate the fact that the county, this past year did expand the protected categories that were included in the testing. I know you had said that the Human Rights Commission, it mainly was responsible for a lot of the outreach and engagement with the community. And I'm not sure if we have a Human Rights Commission now, or if that's still in development? Do we currently have a commission, or is it still vacant since the members were fired?
I think well, the commission was disbanded in August. And so I think we're gonna have a commission by this month. I believe appointments are being made this month.
Okay, and so I would imagine then probably for the last couple of months, we haven't done as much outreach or engagement when it comes to these things. But I'm hopeful that the new commission will be able to pick that back up. Whoever ends up being on that. When it comes to training, it's kind of separate from the outreach and engagement. Is that something that your office, provides like fair housing training to either internally to staff or to external groups? Or is that not part of your charge?
I think in the past we've attended, right, Anna, the training that's put on internally.
We have done it in the past. We haven't done it in the last few years, but we have done fair housing training in the community on various occasions in the past, and can certainly consider doing that.
And I think, I mean, not sorry to put Jennifer or Joe on the spot, but I think you guys do training, right, in the community.
Yeah, so we have done just this past year, we did what we called basically a fair housing awareness campaign. So we did that in April 2024. So we provided materials on renter rights and responsibilities, and basically distributed to, I think it was like 9,000 plus units. We also have a position in our division that goes out and does educational kind of seminars or workshops, and does education there. And a big push lately has been source of income, letting landlords know as well as tenants know that that is a protected class now.
Thank you. Are you?
Actually, if I, not to,
Sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
hi, everybody. Not to put DHS on the spot, but I see Reginette Osby is here, and they also do a lot. She's one of the county's housing locators, and I know works very closely with landlords and does a lot of sort of one-on-one, particularly around source of income. So Reginette, I don't know if you want to jump in or if I just spoke for you. I guess I just spoke for her, sorry.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Yes, Jennifer's right. We also just had a fair housing event. Jennifer, please help me remember, but it was like a couple months ago. Was it October?
Yes, because we did it for Affordable Housing Month. So that's right. We did an event
Yes.
with the Equal Rights Center on fair housing, including source of income, tenant screening, stuff like that, and had like 80 participants, Reginette, I think.
I do believe we had maybe over 100.
Oh, yay us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was targeted at service providers. So, given Reginette's role, we were really focusing on kind of on homeless services providers, shelter providers, people like that. But we had participation from a lot of the community and got feedback that was really helpful. So we want to continue to do that kind of work as well.
Sorry, could you all identify which departments you're part of?
Jennifer and Joel are CPHD.
Oh.
Reginette is DHS, and then Gurjeet and our manager's office.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yes, and I am the housing locator for DHS, and I also work with our CLC partners, our shelter partners, I should say. And I'm also a real estate broker, so I have lots of contact with realtors and landlords. And we do get a lot of our clients complaining that they're turned down because of the either income or because they have a subsidy. So I do run into that a lot.
Richie, I know you were talking about how we have about 20 accepted fair housing complaints over the last 4 years. Are you able to provide any breakdown of like what, based on which protected classes or characteristics those were, from, and if you don't have all that information now, that's fine, but it'd be super helpful if you were able to share that with the commission, just so we have a better sense of, the majority of the complaints were disability, and we had some on source of income in the last year. Prior to that, we had some national order. It would just be helpful to know,
Yeah,
what those.
we can get you that breakdown. It's not a problem. We can send that after, probably at some point next week. The major basis has been disability, and correct me if I'm wrong, Anna, I think either we haven't had any or we had one SOI. That's
We've had one source of funds since
SO.
that was added.
Okay. And do we do fair lending investigations? Have we ever, at least since you've been here?
Well, credit is covered under our ordinance. So I would, could fall under that, but I have never seen one since I've been here in 20 something years. Seen one filed, no. But it is available in the ordinance.
So when you say credit, is like appraisal bias currently not included in our ordinance then?
Not
and
specifically.
Yeah.
No, not specifically.
I don't think I don't think that's anywhere in the ordinance stated clearly like that.
in Tiffany, in the federal fair housing law I don't think fair lending, like, it doesn't go into detail about like appraisal bias or like redlining either. But it's just sort of part of, yeah. Okay. Because again, I know that's a challenge that we hear about. Is that something like if someone had a complaint about like appraisal bias or redlining or like pricing disparity or something, if they came to the human rights office now, would you guys say, sorry, we don't take those cases? Or like what would happen if someone did have an allegation of discrimination based on one of those like fair lending categories?
I think, I mean, at the top of my head, I'd have to go, literally, first thing I would do is look at the ordinance and see what it exactly says under the credit and area and see if it fit under there. And if it did, we would absolutely take it. But I haven't seen anything like that either. I just don't, off the top of my head, can't picture what the language under credit says right now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that came up as one of the areas in the home and NWCP letter as where our ordinance isn't substantially equivalent with HUD or the state. So I think maybe the language in our ordinance is similar enough to what's in the federal one that it's assumed that that's included. But that would be a good thing to sort of explore and have you guys started the process of looking at making updates to the ordinance to be substantially equivalent? Or can you talk about, any steps the Office of Human Rights is taking or plans to take aligned with the fair housing plan, sort of in that direction of exploring becoming a fair housing assistance program?
Yeah, so we have not taken any steps yet to suggest changes to the ordinance. We haven't started work on that. I do know that, exploring that partnership is something we've committed to, and we're excited to look into that, but we haven't suggested anything to the ordinance yet.
Okay. Other questions?
Would that be like a thing where we'd ask the county board to require that it become a substantially equivalent, or is it more the option of the staff?
You're talking about changing the ordinance?
Yeah.
I mean, the county board controls the ordinance, so they decide what changes in it, if it gets amended. Staff have a role in recommending changes, like the Office of Human Rights work with the manager and say, we propose the following, if that's something that, they felt was a priority. So yeah, but ultimately the board makes decisions about whether the ordinance should change or not. Any other questions? Okay, well, Gurjeet and Anna and also Jennifer, and Phil, and Ted, thank you very much for being here and answering our questions, providing information. This is super helpful. Really looking forward to seeing the testing report when it becomes public, as well as the breakdown of the cases. I know for the commission, we're, about to have discussion and probably take a vote on a recommendation around the county becoming substantially equivalent, and becoming a FAP. It's something that I personally am very excited about, and I think is very important for us to look at how we can, do even more to support fair housing and enhance our enforcement procedures in the county, and hopefully become a model for what this can look like in Virginia, and do even better than Fairfax and other communities across the state. Especially because I've heard concerns about, like, at the state level, how they're doing their fair housing enforcement under the current administration, and that some of the I want to make sure that folks can turn to Arlington to get the best possible fair housing, investigation and result for them that is going to look at, how do we make you whole again once you've been discriminated against, as much as the law can, because there's other forces at play that are less concerned about that. So I think this is super important.
Have you already sent me your ordinance as is?
Mhm.
If you all send it to me before you make changes or suggest changes, I'd rather take a look at it now, so then we can guide you, as opposed to you just like trying to make blanket changes. It may be more helpful. Sometimes you have to do less of a list than you think.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Susan. Susan, we can't hear you. I don't know if your microphone's not working. And Tiffany, Susan is one of our county board members. I think maybe her headset isn't working, or so go with chat.
Oh, there it is. Oh.
Yeah. Thanks to all of you, commission and staff. I think Susan's still typing. I can't.
Feels like she's.
It looks like she's
Yeah.
typing. During budget season, we always have a housing focused work session. Should be March 11th this year. Oh, it's my birthday. Okay, fun.
A birthday party.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, I know previously, the Office of Human Rights hasn't been a part of the housing budget session. Is that something that they can be included on this year? Because I think that fair housing enforcement is such an important piece of, like, the housing picture. And I know the Housing Commission, we always have recommendations around that. But staff is not included in that from the Office of Human Rights to really talk about the work that they're doing. It'll be a good time to discuss progress on fair housing testing and future priorities for education and other investments. Totally agree.
And if there's any money for matching for FAP,
Yeah, I think the money helps.
And I'll just say this, I was looking, when you guys were talking, at how much your neighbors got or get. On average, it looks like they get about $130,000 to $140,000 a year.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to give you a ballpark of what their investigations.
Okay. And so Susan, her last comment was, yes, we tagged that the Office of Human Rights, or the Human Rights Office should be there. last year, and we'll try to arrange the Human Rights Office participation this year. Great, thank you, Susan. Okay, well, thank you very, very much to our speakers. So as I said, this is an action item for the commission. And so my recommendation would be that we make a recommendation to the county board that they become a fair housing assistance program and take all of the necessary steps to do that. First of which is reviewing and amending the ordinance, and then working with HUD to go through that process.
Second.
Okay, yeah, I guess, sure, yes, I will make that motion. Seconded.
I thought Alex was typing.
Oh, yeah.
I was.
I don't normally make motions as chair, but there's no reason why I can't, so I'm fine with that. Okay, any discussion around this?
And I'm also happy to leave if you guys need to have like the pros
Oh,
and
no,
cons.
it's, yeah,
Okay.
well, this is all recorded and public, so.
Just a quick question. So you received about 140,000. Is there like a ballpark estimate, just thinking like startup costs that Fairfax had to do, or?
So they would have gotten the same cost that I talked about at the beginning. So again, it can be up to 160, not guaranteeing that that's what I'm gonna give. We'll have to base it on the size of your county and everything else. But, you know, let's just say it's 100,000. You know, that will help you in the capacity building state to hire an investigator, ensure that you have education and outreach to get folks understanding.
Any other discussion?
Sounds great to me, especially getting funding.
Okay, then let's do a roll call vote. Commissioner Macbeth votes aye. Commissioner Surface,
Yes, fine.
Commissioner Wanger,
Yes.
Commissioner Linick,
Yes.
Commissioner Ventrone,
Yes.
Commissioner Ross,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz, Commissioner Coleman,
Aye.
Commissioner Montgomery,
Aye.
Commissioner McGilvray.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and then I think that's all who is with us tonight. Did I miss anyone? Okay, it passes unanimously. Gurjeet? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm mute, yeah. Just a quick question for you. Do you have any other questions for our office, or we'll let you to your work and get out of your way?
I think we're good. Thank you so much. Yeah, you guys are welcome to drop, but very much appreciate you being here tonight and answering our questions and provide us with super helpful information.
Thank you for the invitation, and we'll get you the breakdown next week. Take care.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.
You too.
If you need anything, let me know.
Thank you.
Great. I propose we take a 5-minute break, and then we come back at 8.
Unmuted.
Okay, do we have more? Let's go ahead and get started. So the next item on our agenda is the annual report. So hopefully people had a chance to look at that. I had sent it out, I think 2 days ago. So this report, and thank you, Katie, for your help with this, is really meant to be a recap. I mean, I think the official purpose is like, we send it to the county board and say, this is what we accomplished this past year. So it's meant to kind of summarize what we worked on. And if I find it helpful to putting this together because it gives me a better sense of some of the things that were included in the work plan. I was like, oh, there was less to put in the annual report than I thought. Maybe that's less of a priority for us than, we first thought. So did anyone have any recommended changes or questions about the annual report?
Yeah, mine are editorial. You just have to have the page numbers go with the right subjects. They're out of order, like the rent stabilization study is 14, not 12. So I think you just have, depending on how it prints, you just got to change the page number. That's always a challenge when doing an index. Page number.
Yeah, I think that was also probably just didn't update the table of contents like before I sent it out after changes were made. Also, I want to thank Katie for going through and adding the results in. So that's not something that we previously had done, but she was like, I think you should note like what happened after we took a particular action. And so not everything has a result, but a lot of the items do. And I do think it's helpful to get a better sense of like, this is what we were, not just what we recommended, but what was the result. Although certainly not claiming that just because we recommended it, that was the only reason why, the county board did a certain thing, but yeah. And especially like when we looked at the legislative priorities, it was nice to see that they did incorporate a number of our legislative priorities into the county's priorities. Any other questions or recommendations?
I just wanted to say I agree. The results are extremely useful as someone who I cannot track all the time what happens with every one of our recommendations and making us feel like we're contributing something. Yeah, it makes a huge difference. So really, thank you both for putting this together. And then one super minor thing to note on page 7, number 6, the actual numbers bolded. The others aren't.
That's it.
That was very easy to read.
Great job, Helen.
Thank you for your help with it.
The format or whatever it was.
The format was passed down by Eric Berkey and his reports, and then I just went with the same template and updated the material with the changes every year. But okay, any other changes?
Brian.
Oh, yep. Go ahead, Brian.
No changes. Just wanted to thank you and Katie both for this. Is really useful and it's a very elegant way of just summarizing all the information over the last year and to kind of help guide us as to what our efforts should be moving forward. So it kind of, as you said earlier, helps us organize topics according to the density of the section.
Thank you, Brian. One thing I wanted to ask, Alex, can we add at least like the last 3 annual reports to our webpage, like as like part of the quick notes or whatever? I know we have like our charter and our equity framework, but I think it would be great to add this so that people what have they done for us?
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments?
Good question. So the one thing I really was trying to find, I couldn't find for the results, was the Crystal House AHIF allocation. Does anyone, maybe Alex, know like what happened? Did they approve the AHIF allocation? House 3?
I mean, I know that they did, but I
Okay.
just, I was like, I've spent a lot of hours on this, and that's one more thing to look up.
Okay, I assume that
It
they did.
was, yeah, on consent agenda last month.
Well, are you talking about the one from February?
There were 2 of them, and I couldn't find either.
Yeah, they were both approved.
Okay.
They were, yeah.
The I mean-
That recommendation was approved.
Do we just want to add that?
That they were approved.
Yeah. And we can just go back and put that as a result. So. That was February, and then the other one was what month?
Was the Crystal House. 4%.
Oh, it was October.
Over.
On the strength of our recommendation alone, the county board approved both. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the annual report with the changes that? Okay, second, do I have a second? Second. Let's do a roll call vote. Right back, votes yes. Commissioner Surface, Commissioner Winger,
Yes.
Commissioner Linick,
Yes.
Commissioner Ventrone,
Yes.
Commissioner Ross.
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman. Commissioner Coleman. May have stepped away. Okay, Commissioner Montgomery. Commissioner McGilvray.
Yes.
Okay, did you say yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll call again, Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And it passes unanimously. Great. So next on the agenda is, we had Maureen, our new liaison, was gonna give some remarks to the commission. She is not here yet. Susan, are you still on? Oh, no, Susan dropped. I was gonna say, if Susan wants to say anything, welcome to. But we can swap this with,
Here she comes.
oh, here we go. Perfect timing. We literally just got to you. Okay.
You're a little early, but I apologize. We had the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission meeting across the street, basically, in their headquarters. So was there, nobody here.
So, we just approved our annual report,
Great.
after having very good discussion with HUD on the Fair Housing Assistance Program and also the Office of Rights. And we voted to recommend that the county board, move forward with having Arlington become a Fair Housing Assistance Program and amend our ordinance to be substantially equivalent with HUD and take all other necessary steps. So I guess we get a letter
Okay.
next week.
I'll look forward to it.
Yeah. And so now it is time for your remarks to the commission. And also, if you want to have dialogue, I know Matt, I think last year had gone around to each person and said, like, what question did he ask? Was it like, what do you hope to accomplish or something on the commission or something like that? But it's up to you, Maureen. You've got how much time we have to into this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to make this conversational. I know a number of you, I less know others. I'm really excited to get to work with this commission this year. Entering year 2 on the board. Still very new, but somehow very experienced as well. I think probably everyone knows that a huge part of why I ran for the board and was motivated to do this in the first place is housing. I think it's, you know, very telling who's in the room when a lot of decisions get made, and you know, there's not official documentation of everyone's housing status as board members, but we're pretty sure I'm the first ever renter that's ever been on the county board here in Arlington, in a community that's 60+% renters. And I, you know, I actually didn't know that when I ran for the county board. That was something that came up down the line, because I had just assumed, like I think many people do, that because it's such a common, normal thing in our community, that surely someone had represented that. And I talked to a few past board members, including Paul Ferguson, who's previously the youngest ever person who served on the board. And I was like, well, you were a renter, right? And he was like, no, people told me that if I ran as a renter, it would never be taken seriously. That it showed that I wasn't, you know, putting down roots and I wasn't committed to the community. And I think that mindset, you know, that was in the 90s that he had that conversation. That was, I think, maybe even before I was born. But I think has persisted in some ways, that renters are, you know, either only in affordable housing communities, and there's people who live in affordable housing, and then there's homeowners. And it's like there's a vast number of people who live somewhere in between those two states. And I think I, you know, started out in more partisan community organizations, but then also got really involved in my neighborhood association, the Civic Federation, and in a lot of community conversations, I just really found that the nuance of housing experience was kind of missing, and that people wanted it to be simple, and people wanted to talk about, you know, pathways to home ownership, and that was the goal of housing policy. And I really just want my rent to not go up more than 5% every year. I celebrated when my rent increase this year was only $100 per month, and yeah, people cringe. People are like, "Oh my gosh!" And but it's, you know, I think that's the housing reality for so much of our community, and I just wasn't hearing any of that talked about. I was hearing so many other things, and it just was really important to me to inject kind of a dose of lived experience into the conversation. And I've been so happy to be able to work with my colleagues, and you know, sometimes I think I say things that they're still kind of shocked by, and or we'll get letters from the community being like, you know, my apartment complex is adding a digital service fee charge that I can't not pay, because if you want to pay your rent through their online portal, you have to pay the service fee, and how can that be allowed? But I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty much everywhere. And everyone was like, are you serious? And I was like, oh yeah, that's just how it is. And so I think having those honest conversations has been a really important part. And I'm glad for the Housing Commission's role in being able to be a convener and a venue to invite people in, invite federal partners, invite community partners, and have honest conversations that reflect the full reality of our community. And I have spent a lot of time talking with Kelly lately, and I think there's a lot of good work that y'all are hopefully taking on this year. And you know, my goal is to be a partner and a supporter, and to be as present as you would like me to be. I know different commissions want different levels of involvement, but you know, this is why I'm here, is housing. And I think it's important to show up for the things that you care about, but also recognize that you're, you know, an independent group of people who are not me, and so you don't have to have all the same thoughts as me. You don't have to have the same experiences as me. But that we're able to find a way to really work together to get, you know, where we want to go, which is, I think, an improved housing community in Arlington. And yeah, I am very passionate. I'm also liaison for the Tenant Landlord Commission. I'm very passionate about figuring out the maximum extent of what we can do on renters' rights and supporting people, because Virginia law doesn't give us a ton of room here. But whatever we can do, we should be doing. And even if it's, I have a group of folks that's struggling right now who I just told, CC me on every email to your property manager. And, I don't say anything because there's nothing I can do, but I think it makes a difference to have, that someone's paying attention. And I will say that also, that's been a huge piece of feedback I've heard from the community is folks who are like, you're the first elected official I've heard talk about things the way I think about them. And I think that matters a lot because especially this climate that we have today, I think there's a lot of despondency and hopelessness. And so, especially in the younger generation of feeling like, what the heck are we supposed to do now? And I think a big part of what we can do is show people that we're hearing them and actually doing something about the problems that they're experiencing. And if we can even make a small dent on housing here in Arlington, I think that would show a lot of responsiveness to the people who live here. So I'm happy to take questions. I don't know, if there's things on your mind. I know I missed the vast majority of this meeting, and I'm really sorry about that. But I don't know if there's anything. I'm happy to just basically open up the floor if that works for you all.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And thank you, Marie. So what do you want to see accomplished when it comes to housing policy this year in Arlington?
This year. Yeah, so the homeownership study that just happened, I would like to see us actually enact some of it. I think we do a lot of really good planning in Arlington and so action sometimes. Yeah. And so I've had a lot of conversations with staff and my board colleagues about kind of me taking informal point on just, how do we get from a plan to actually doing it, especially I talked with our housing staff a lot about the cohort model and thinking about, it's not just someone who's ready to buy and knows exactly what they're looking for and they just need that extra support, but saying like, I have so many friends who have no idea where you start. They don't know what to be doing now to set them up for success in 5 or 10 years. Like, even if they know I can't buy right now, there are steps you should be taking. And so really right sizing it to say, there's so many places in the community that need that extra help. And maybe someone wants to come in and just say, one day I'd like to be a homeowner. Well, I need to know. And I think that's a really good place to be starting. So I would like to see that, get moving forward. It's gonna be a hard budget year. We all know that. I think I've talked with the Tenant Landlord Commission somewhat about ways to move forward more voluntary information sharing on tenant rights and responsibilities, because we do a decent job of getting that information to our affordable housing developments. But again, vast majority of renters in Arlington are not in a committed affordable housing development, and they are also facing a lot of adversity. It's an asymmetrical power balance, whether you are in committed affordable or not. And so making sure that people know, a friend who hasn't had hot water for 2.5 weeks. And apparently as long as you have water, it is not considered an emergency repair. And so figuring out, how do we work with the tools that we've got and make sure that, you as a renter know, here's what I can ask for, here's how I need to document it, here's how I can protect myself, is really important to me. And I think there's a lot more that we can do on that. And then, I think continuing in this not so great economic environment to push forward the good projects that we do see and not get caught up in too many challenges. You know, we want to make sure we get projects good and right, but you know, I've said this in my New Year's remarks, but housing starts for 2024 is at the second lowest level that it's been in the last decade for Arlington. And when housing starts stop, housing completions stop. And so, you know, I think we've celebrated a lot that Arlington has been meeting our housing goals or is projected to meet their regional housing commitments, but those projections are based on continuing the rate of construction that we've been at in the past. And if we go from, you know, year after year meeting or exceeding those goals to being substantially below those goals, that trajectory is going to change really, really fast. And so we can't, the interest rate environment makes it hard. No one wants to actually break ground on projects right now. Labor costs have gone up about 40%. So it's challenging, but I think that to me is a really important part of the equation is figuring out, you know, in that challenging environment, how do we get projects to go to shovel ready and not just sit and wait for 5 years? Because if all of our entitled projects wait for 5 years, we're going to be really far behind. So those are 3 things.
Alex, did we hear back about the HUD grant for homeownership?
I'm not sure. I can check in with the staff on that, but
I know that was another, you know,
Yes, part of.
really important piece of, you know, essentially community land trust and lots of different things. Joe, did you have a question?
I mean, everything she said, I'm agreeing with. I have so much to say, but I take up the time. I would mention, first of all, I've had a 50-year background in housing, and I was on this commission 35 years ago. And it's just enjoyable to be here because I started my career with the housing voucher program at HUD, so I'm very sympathetic on the rental side. And one of the things I'm doing in my private life is to improve the federal housing voucher program because it is woefully being underutilized. We had a rent moratorium during COVID, and we couldn't even fight it because a lot of the states couldn't even use what they got under COVID. Source of income is an issue because landlords are not racist. They don't want to deal with HUD because of the program. I work for the National Association of Realtors. We had a legislative amendment to make a source of income a protected class under the Fair Housing Act, and we couldn't even get it passed through our membership because our membership did not want to be forced to deal with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development on Section 8. So Section 8, I mean, all of us have to work to improve the program. And one of the things that I've been working on in my private life is working with a minority entrepreneur that has created a company called Matrix Rental Solution, which is coming up with a universal rental application. He's got a contract with his home state of Connecticut, and they're doing a lot of great stuff on the rental side. And this is one of the things that I wanted us to put on our work plan and to have him actually brief the commission because it is something that will, and he's working with HUD and FHFA and Fannie and Freddie, it will really enhance making landlords want to use the program because it's all technologically based. It would be data driven and stuff like that. And it's good for the tenants because now renters have to pay a $50 application fee every time they're doing it. So if you have a universal rental application, and that's what they're doing in Connecticut, but if we had something in Arlington, it would be good. He's also working with McInerney, which is a local realtor, and they have a lot of rental resources. So he's already got a footprint in the area. So that's one thing. But one of the things that has really gotten me up is the missing middle. And missing middle was a travesty because it wasn't messaged right. And, you know, I think if the county, you know, excessive ADUs is kind of the camel's nose under the tent with missing middle. California has had great experience with doing ADUs to getting is a way to encroaching on single family zoning and stuff like that. So my question is the county done anything on, accessible dwelling units per se, granny flats and stuff like that? And also changing ordinances to make modular and manufactured housing. And I'm not saying trailers and mobile homes because they are not that. I participated in a development in Hagerstown, Maryland, 250 units of manufactured homes that Fannie and Freddie have endorsed, and they were all up there, and FHA is putting lending on and stuff. And now, and Congress is going to change the law where they're going to take the axle off so you can stack them and do townhouses. It's a very affordable way of building housing quickly. And this is where the county is going to go. We're going to have to change some of our ordinances and building codes to accommodate that kind of construction. So these are things I'm hoping we can do. And the last thing I have that I want to say is Alex in the housing department, I think, sponsored an affordable housing tour this summer, which I participated on. Unfortunately, not a lot of people attended. And it was an eye opener because we have great resources here. They're phenomenal resources that if we would publicize it to the people, the taxpayers, so they know what we're building here. I mean, they don't know what we're building. I mean, I was amazed at that Ethiopian homeownership thing off Columbia Pike. I live in Rod. Yeah. So one of the things that I would like us to do, and if the county doesn't do it, we should talk to Greg Hamilton to have the Arlington magazine do a special just on affordable housing. I think he did something on homeless 3 or 4 years ago, but I really think if he could do something on affordable housing, putting the pictures say 1,000, right? Putting these pictures in there. And then I don't think we would have the pushback that we're having from the people that are suing and all this kind of stuff. So that's what I wanted to get off my chest.
We've spent some time together, so
Yeah,
it's good to see you.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of potential to do that. So. And I'm glad you're on the board. It's good to have, even though I'm a homeowner, and I was a homeowner in 1978 at Circle Condominium off Langston Boulevard. So it's nice to have renter representation on the board. Just don't do anything on rent control, because then we won't have any development in the area.
Joe, you were one of the lucky few who could purchase a home for a few like berries and.
Well, you know how I purchased my first home? I-66 paid for my first home. I was living in a condominium. They took some of our land. I got an eminent domain and I got 2 checks, one from the state of Virginia and one from for the portion of the land that they took. So that financed my second home in Wingate 1.
What I heard is more eminent domain.
Right, no, eminent domain is.
I was gonna say,
Eminent domain
let's
is great. If you pay the landowner, if you pay the owners, eminent domain is great.
Just quickly get a business going that has a lot of revenue right there. Oh.
There's the next Arl Now headline. Housing Commission endorsement.
But I'm saying it's fair compensation. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
The
no,
whole
absolutely.
Eminent domain, it's got to be fairly compensated.
I have a question about the developers. How do the county attract more developers who want to build condominiums? Everyone don't, a lot of people don't always want to just rent and just give someone else or make someone else rent.
Forever and ever.
What about condominiums coming or something in between co-ops or whatever? It's coming into, no?
Not co-ops.
Okay, no co-ops.
Co-ops are really complicated.
Okay.
They have their pluses, they have their minuses, but I would so condos, I've had this conversation with a couple. I've co-opted some of our briefings on other topics to be like, so why don't you do this? There are really high liability standards for building condo that does not exist for building rental. And the economic incentives basically right now with the insurance regime, with the price point at which you'd have to sell makes it really hard. I'm trying to you know, one thing I would like to do is like get a group of developers and financiers and people from the community together to talk about like what, you know, like what has to give to get those condo units, because it is something where if you look at kind of the arc of development, right, it was a mix, it was a mix, it was a mix, and then that mix started dropping and dropping, and now it's basically zero. So I know that one, you know, not all developers can do ownership units depending on their corporate structure. They just legally might not be able to do it. Others aren't willing to take on the risk. Others, it's a financing thing where their lender isn't going to give them money to do it because they can't guarantee within, you know, a certain time frame that they'll earn their revenue back with, you know, the expected return on investment. I've talked a lot with folks about that, trying to understand, you know, like why are the standards for return on investment so high? And one thing I think that gets lost a little bit is that the investor money that they use, you know, it's often things like pension funds and your retirement fund and IRA funds and things like that. And so like, I know that, you know, developers surely are making a lot of money, but their requirements on some of the financing side is not just because they're making their money, but it's also because they're investing other people's money, and we don't want that system to collapse, right? I would like my retirement fund to continue to go up. I'm sure we all would. And so like there are just some things that are unmovable on that side. So how do we figure out what we can move on our end to get that through? And another thing that I've been told is that some of the new larger condo developments that have gone up, like a 150 unit development took them 3 years to sell through because the price point is so high. And that's the other problem right now, is that the people who can, like, there's the crowd who wants a brand new condo for 700,000 plus, and can afford the mortgage for that. You know, there's a lot of direct substitutes that just make a little bit more sense, where like if you're already hitting that price point, like maybe you go for an older townhouse, maybe you look for you know, something else. And so I think there's a big conversation to be had there, and I'm really interested in having it because you know, I'm not a person who is dreaming of a single family home. I watch my parents do yard work every weekend for like my entire life. It does not appeal to me. And
We agree. I saw my house. You don't have to shovel snow either.
Shoveling. So there's a lot of things. And so, you know, I would love to get myself into a 2-bedroom condo, or, you know, I think like the stacked flat that is like townhouse adjacent condo even. Would love to see more of that coming through, but we need to figure out what it is that gets us there. And I just don't know that answer right now, but I think it's something that we're gonna have to figure out, because there's just, we're hitting up on
There's a lot of rentals going up, and everyone doesn't, you know, want to rent and pay
Yeah.
someone else to be
Yeah.
rich. They want investments
or
themselves.
at least not
So,
forever, right?
At least one building, like you
Yeah.
put up like 10 buildings or
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, go up
Yeah.
at least one building
Yeah.
dedicated to that.
The issue really is our land prices.
Right, exactly.
That's gonna-
Yeah.
You can do townhouse condominiums. When I bought Wingate, I bought the smallest unit, $68,000, 1978, 14% interest rate,
Right.
14% interest rate.
Yeah.
That's why I have no sympathy for
Incredible.
everyone that's yelling about 7%. I paid 14 was my first.
I do think one of our big problems is cheap condominiums.
Yes,
Are a
yeah.
huge problem. My mother owns a condo in Boston. I won't name the name, but I sat in on the meeting with her a week ago for the special assessment.
Oh, yeah.
But they have been prepping their residents of the building for a couple of years now. So actually, they're all kind of on board, understanding that they have to make these repairs.
Yeah.
But this is a fairly well-to-do, but not a luxury
Right.
condo. But then I think about the ones that are affordable and how are those
Yeah.
people going to be able to maintain?
And that's been a big part of the trade-off, right? Is you see there are some condos that might be in the $200,000-$300,000 range, and then you click through and the monthly condo fees are almost $1,000. And so you're stacking that on top of your mortgage payment already, and it blows through. I was talking to a loan officer who said that for every $50 in condo fees, you lose $10,000 of purchase price that you can afford. And that was when interest rates even were lower than they currently are. So I'm sure that trade-off has only expanded. But that, that really erodes the affordability of some of these condos that seem on their face like really good options. Right. Oh boy.
It looks like a great deal, and then you look at it.
Yeah. And then I think you're also for first time or new home buyers or even first gen home buyers especially, you're looking at that and you're then taking on the risk too that your unit could potentially need massive renovation work or major appliance work or other renovation in the near future, or the building is going to have that special assessment, and hopefully they're forthcoming about that. But you might think, if you're the first person who's ever lived in a condo, my parents never lived in a condo, they don't know, and might not be able to advise you on what the risks are. And so you might hear special assessment, oh, like what, $100, $1,000, and then it's much bigger than that. And so reviving the condo initiative, which was to kind of focus on that as part of the home ownership study recommendations.
Right, yes.
And that's been the thing that we've talked about, figuring out how to do in a sustainable way. We also the revision to a environmental grant program called CPACE that allows basically environmental investments to be done through a very special low interest rate process. But for some things like an HVAC or a heat pump or like larger things that have big environmental impact but are key infrastructure to a building, I think it would be interesting to look at, like, can we do a crossover there, right? And can we have this environmental lending scheme, not in a negative way, but just
The British sense of the word.
yeah, in the British sense of the word. And we have this need for buildings to update and upgrade and go through these major capital projects. And so, if there's a bridge that we can get between those two programs, I think that would be a really critical, and synergistic way to approach it.
One of the things that I wanted to mention, and that we may have talked about it before one-on-one, but and this is in general, not just when it comes to housing programs in Arlington, but one of my frustrations with the county has been the lack of marketing. And I'd love to see a sustained campaign targeting low-income people in Arlington at our bus stops and our, along the metro, places where people frequent, that instead of just like, hey, don't drive your car, walk places, which is great, but that's not targeted towards low-income people. It talks about all of the services that we offer that people don't know exist, whether that's our affordable housing through, CAPS, whether that's housing grants, housing choice voucher program, our homelessness services. Like, there's so many things that the county offers that people have no idea exist. And there's so many people who don't ever access the services because who need them. And they may move on to the county or just struggle because they don't know that they exist. And I know I've heard from staff before, like, hesitation around advertising and marketing because they're like, well, we don't want to get flooded with applicants. But it's like, I think that's a terrible way to look at it, because I'd rather be flooded so that, as a policymaker, yes, and we actually need to increase funding for these programs, because instead what you hear is, we're fine, like, we're meeting demand. You don't need to pay attention to this program, when there's a whole bunch of people who don't know it exists suffering in the county. And so just having a marketing campaign that is focused on like the supports that we provide to low income folks, provide a lot of services, I think would be fantastic to spread the word. Because there's just so many people who have no idea what the county can do to help them get back on their feet.
No, I think that's a great idea. I will say, I don't, especially on housing, all of our housing programs, I don't think anyone's telling us, no, we're fine. I think we're hearing across the board, whether it's housing, food assistance, eviction prevention, Medicaid, childcare subsidy, like we have more and growing demand than we've ever seen ever before. And so I at least, I'm hearing it. But I do think that the broad point of we don't do the best job of getting the message out. And a lot of times it's people who already know about things, who know about all of the things. And broadening that, I think, is an important goal. I am also the co-chair of our audit committee, and our new auditor is amazing. And his first audit has been the housing grant program, which I think he wants to, when that's completed, come and present to you all. But part of it, it's not a financial audit, it's a performance audit. It's how are we doing at meeting our goals? How are we doing at processing applications? Is the application process discouraging people? Are we getting the program in front of the people we say we are going to? And so I think marketing is kind of indirectly a part of what he's evaluating. And so he might have some good insight into, what are we doing? What aren't we doing? But I just bring that up as like another thing that, we'll have some more information and like conversation about specifically the housing grant program when it comes to like, are we achieving our goal of reaching the people we say we're supposed to reach?
Well, the people who, you mentioned Medicaid, SNAP, and WIC, the people who are whose full-time jobs are dedicated to helping administer those programs, they say the biggest issue they have is getting people who are already eligible
Yes.
on the program. So it's the same issue.
Dream technology upgrade is single unified application for all social services, but that is a long game. I think one day we can get there, but especially when we have many different federal, state, and local eligibility requirements, it's a little harder. And you're dealing with personally identifiable information, which adds another level.
And an online application.
Yeah.
So that people don't have to call, because I can only imagine like Gen Z folks, like who a lot of people are scared to use the phone, younger generations. And
it's true.
It's a real barrier to like if they need to access the services, and it's like you have to call someone. Yeah, like I will be homeless.
I would rather be homeless.
Yeah.
Check
So and that's true. Like that exists for like our public health division as well. Like there's a lot of things that like you can only access either in person or by phone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I feel like people have smartphones. Like that's the way they want to communicate, and we don't really offer that option for a lot
where
of
they
programs. Yeah.
Speaking of homelessness, I noticed I've seen more individuals out, and you can't help but to, have a great empathy for them, especially right now, it's freezing. What is the county doing, or do we have any more programs coming up, or maybe partner with local hotels for extreme cold weather, so they have a place, so individuals have a place to stay? Because I know Pathway? They changed it. They have a limited amount of beds, and it's always full. So what do we do for?
Yeah, so we do partner with hotels, and we have a hypothermia shelter as well that is open from November through March or April.
The Pathways?
No, it's separate from that, and there's a 24-hour hotline where if you see someone even who you suspect might need somewhere to go, you can call and they'll come check on the situation. Our annual point in time count is coming up next week, 22nd.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Wednesday. And we'll have the youth point in time count during the afternoon, I believe from 2 to 7 p.m. at Arlington Mill. And so that's focused on, teens, younger people, transitional age youth, so up to 25-ish even. And it'll be a resource fair and tons of community people and a time to connect. But then at night is when we do the actual going out and manually contacting every person who is unhoused in Arlington on that, it's point in time because it's one given night, and helping, connect them to shelter, connect them to other resources. Some of them, I went last year, and a lot of them decline. They don't feel comfortable, or they're, using substances and would like to continue to use substances, and they're just not in a place to be ready for it. And so it's really worth doing if you have interest. You'll also learn a lot because there's a presentation, before you go out, and you can get connected. I was with one of our leads of our mobile crisis unit to do the count last year. And just even in the car during the interviews, the amount that I learned just watching him and his knowledge and expertise was really impressive. And so there's a lot going on. There could be a lot more going on, and we are seeing an increase, nationally, regionally, and locally. We are seeing an increase in unhoused people, and I think that is likely to continue. It is it's frightening, not because the people are frightening, but because there's limited resources, and as we continue to blow through and exceed those, then we give more, but then the numbers have kept outpacing the resources that we give, and so there is, I think, serious concern about the regional approach. DC is no longer doing eviction prevention, for example, and so we can't make DC continue programs that were really effective. I know they did it because their budget is as tight as everyone's is, but that has a direct impact on people being able to stay in homes. And we are a really interconnected region, so the choices of our neighbors do impact us, and it's all an ecosystem. But
yeah, it is an ecosystem, and we have to remember the individuals that's in between, because everyone isn't, I just want to be on the streets, and you have working individuals who just can't afford, either got evicted or just can't afford to live, so they are working every day.
The majority of unhoused people in Arlington are working.
So I don't know if it's the next budget time to address, that population, because that population tends to get forgotten about. You'll go to the, seriously mental ill, or the individuals that you see that you're like, oh, they're homeless. You assume because you see them on the street, but then you have that population that's working, the working poor or the working homeless, which is
right. Yeah. And I think that's part of the approach with having the resource fair in the afternoon of the point in time count, is that even, people don't think of it this way, but even couch surfing, moving from friend to friend or family member to family member, that's a form of homelessness. And, but we're not going to find that person by going out on the streets, but maybe they'll come to a resource fair or some other community event, and we can make contact and we can help get them, on a pathway to more stability. I do have a lot of faith in our, we call it the continuum of care group. And I think our staff are really good, and their hearts and heads are in the right place, and they're doing the work. It's gotten harder over the years. And so they're still doing the work, but
Where's the cold shelter at? What's the hypothermia?
The hypothermia shelter.
It used to be around here.
Yeah, that's the issue right there. It's like,
I was gonna say, I think it's nearby, but I don't.
And that's the issue about not advertising bridge, you know.
There's a fair amount of outreach. Those people know where it is.
And I'm sure the police probably,
Yeah, I mean, it used to be across the street before we redeveloped this area.
Say, yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, so we talked about this when DHS came to our meeting in December. And part of the reason why I'd asked him to come is because a friend of mine was experiencing homelessness for several months and actually quite a bit of time. And he had no idea that he could go to shelter services in Arlington. And he had no idea that any of the resources that were available to him. And you know, through the process, he's now in a committed affordable unit. He has a rapid rehousing grant. There's still challenges for him to stay housed, but if not for me, yeah, like I think he'd still be either couch surfing or on the street, and that could easily be deadly on a day like today or this week. Next week's going to be even colder. So I think there's a lot of people who just don't know. And despite the outreach that we do, I think it's just not enough. And yeah.
14th Street.
And I think from that presentation, like it was kind of alarming to hear about the increasing need. And I think a lot of us, because I was certainly shocked last year to learn that we had such long wait times to get into just shelter in Arlington, because I assumed that because we have great services here, that if you are unhoused and you need access to shelter, call the number and they're like, great, we have a bed for you, come to the shelter. And instead, it was sometimes it happens, but other times it may be 6 months or 3 months, a while before you get access. Assuming that they can't also, steer you directly into like an affordable home. And one of the key things that they stressed is that we don't have enough affordable homes. So the people who are in the shelters have no place to go. We don't have enough affordable units to put them into. And then we don't have enough like deep subsidy rental vouchers to keep them in affordable housing. And, while they're working to get their income back to a point where they can support themselves.
that's, I think, really important to explore the supply problem there, because people want to, voucher and housing grant their way out of the problem. But my current metaphor that I'm like stuck on is like it's like musical chairs, right? If there's not another chair, you're out, and you can shuffle around who has the chairs, but unless you're adding chairs to the game, someone's without a chair. And that's, that happens throughout the spectrum of affordability where, maybe someone who's in a current affordable unit who's like starting to get really, they're doing what we want them to do. They're stable, they're employed, they're moving up. They can't find something that's that next level of affordability where they maybe don't need a committed affordable unit anymore, but the jump from there is to something that's twice as expensive. And, okay, well, crap, so I'm going to stay here now, but that means that someone who's in a shelter can't move into that unit. And if that person stays in the shelter, then that means, someone who's out on the street can't move into the shelter. And, that's where building, even at the top of the market, it lets some of those movements start happening. And right now, it's just that downward compression of the market because, I always say if you can afford a $1 million townhouse, I would really like you to live in a $1 million townhouse because I can't. And so I need the 2-bedroom condo that you're in. And if I'm in the 2-bedroom condo, I'll move out of my 1-bedroom apartment. It's all interconnected. And until we bring, build more chairs, it's keeping people stuck in places that they're not choosing to be and that frankly are not what we know from like an evidence-based policy perspective, the best place for them to be either. But we just can't voucher our way out of the problem if we're not building physical spaces for people to go.
I think good plan, eminent domain, the condemned
Joe,
Marriott, condemned Marriott in Rosslyn, sold affordable housing and a gondola
I stare at the Marriott.
into Georgetown. It would be perfect. You heard it here first.
Remember that.
Did you say annex Georgetown? What did you
No.
say?
Annex Georgetown.
The gondola. Gondola.
Oh,
Just remember that eminent domain does require us to pay fair market price. And fair
If
market,
it's condemned, though, I would assume the value is lower.
well, it's the value of the land,
The land is.
of the waterfront property in Roslyn.
That's
I'll
true.
just throw that out there.
Can we not condemn the land as well?
You work on that and bring a proposal.
Fair. Well, I know we're going to be talking about our draft work plan, which covers a lot of the topics that we've been discussing. And I don't know, Maury, if you wanted to continue engagement or if we should move into that. And there will likely be more discussion about these topics as we get into the work plan.
Can't wait to see what Arl now writes about it.
I was gonna say, I was impressed with listening.
Direct quote.
Quote from Kellen Macbeth.
But it seems to be the things that we only spend like 30 seconds talking about. Yeah. So it's gonna be some random thing that none of us are even paying attention to, but yeah. Okay. Glad that people are interested in housing and the work that we do. Okay, so for our annual work plan, you all have the draft before you. I just want to cover some of the key changes that were made. I appreciate the folks who provided some recommendations, and I tried to incorporate the things that people had sent to me. And Joe, I know you had something as well that you wanted to talk about. This year, I did make some changes to the overarching key objectives. So I eliminated one that we previously had in here around basically going back to the Serrano. We had a specific objective around making sure that we were looking at the CAP long-term strategies, implementation, looking at the recommendations from the Serrano report. And, especially as I was working on like our annual report, there wasn't a whole lot that we did in that area last year. And not because it's not important, but I think, from talking to staff, they've implemented a lot of the recommendations from their report. There's still some things that definitely have not been implemented from our recommendation, the joint subcommittee report with the Tenant Landlord Commission, that I would love to see the county do, but I think it just practically is not a focus for the Housing Commission right now. That could change if other issues pop up. But we also, I think, haven't been seeing the number of like tenants coming to complain about issues at our CAP properties. And I think especially with the inspections that the county's been doing, I think it's 20% of all of our CAP units each year now. We're getting a lot better at catching those maintenance and sort of habitability issues that we had been hearing about before. So in getting rid of the overarching category, I moved some of the bullet points that were under it just to the policy category, because I still think they're important and we should do them, but I just don't think that it's a separate high-level objective that we had previously. So that was a key change that I had made to this. And I can just sort of walk through their changes. So for objective A, maintaining and strengthening your role as Chief Advisory Commission to the Board of Housing Issues. So a key change was the first bullet here, establish a community engagement task force to accomplish the following. So there's two essentially subcommittees that I'm recommending that the Housing Commission establish this year. And the first one is this community engagement task force. And this stems from many conversations over multiple years around, I don't think we do a very good job as a county of engaging with historically marginalized groups, low income groups, in housing policy decision making. And the county has talked about how that's an issue, that's a challenge for all of our commissions. What I would like to do is have a task force of our commission take the lead on figuring out what are some best practices from across the country or other localities. Even I talked to the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments about like, could we have a conversation about, something like this and bring together some of the other like housing commission chairs or similar bodies from the DMV to talk about things like this. And I think coming up with recommendations to sort of say, hey, we think that the county should start just making some up, but they should start paying a stipend to low-income residents to serve on commissions. So there was specifically the housing commission, or we should, have more events and meetings like in low-income neighborhoods or in CAF properties or things like that. So that would be kind of my expectation for what this group would be coming up with and producing as example recommendations. The other thing specifically, and this is the third bullet point, the sub bullet here, partner with the county board office to hold a housing committee conversation. So I think it would be really great this year to have a pretty big event. I don't know who attended the 2050 event last year, but that sort of gave me an idea that, the county board office can have events with the community. It's not just staff. And I think one of the things that has been missing in Arlington, especially from housing, is more board-led activities to engage with the community instead of just staff-led. And I think we've had a lot of staff engaging, and but there's limits on what they can say, the questions that they can answer, whereas our elected leaders are able to engage more in I think in a healthy way that adds to what staff has been able to do. And what I'm kind of envisioning for this is, as part of this task force, working with the county board office, assuming that the board is okay with this and signs off on it. And I've had some conversations with them about it. But having a big event where we invite people, but it's also open to the public, where let's say 2 board members give a presentation on, here are the key housing challenges that we see in Arlington. Here are the things that the county's already doing to address those. Here's what we'd like to do moving forward to sort of set the stage. We have Q&A for the folks. They can ask questions of the board members. And then we have small group conversations with the attendees that I think ideally would be facilitated by the members of the Housing Commission if we all can attend. We have pre-developed questions about housing challenges and solutions, and we go through with the groups and collect those answers to get a better sense of what does the community think about these, what are their priorities, and I think that can help feed into the new comprehensive planning effort that's I think kicking off this year, as well as just help us and the board get a better sense of where the community is and hopefully bridge some of the divide that we've had about the sort of pro-growth and anti-growth in the community, or the pro-missing middle, anti-missing middle. So that's part of what I'm envisioning as part of this task force. Yeah, go ahead.
So my question is, like, the county board have your Monday open door Monday. Yeah, couldn't we just do it in conjunction with something that already exists?
How many people typically attend?
I've had upwards of 30 people. Sometimes it's 3 people. It really depends on what the moment in time is, and
To give you a sense of what I'm thinking, like 200 people.
I don't think you could get 200
Yeah, I
people
don't-
about housing. I think
Right.
about 30 people,
Oh, I think you.
that would be a good thing,
Yeah,
just having done these.
You're gonna get the people in Country Club Hills are gonna be complaining about.
Those are the
That-
people-
What I would,
Part of it.
what I would recommend, I like your idea, and I would do something around Home Ownership Month, which is June. And what what they did on 2050 at Amazon using that facility or something, which is fairly nicely located to get a critical mass. But I kind of like the idea, like, Maureen and another board member, two board members. And I kind of like the idea, and you can go with the NAACP, reach out to all these groups to invite and have a conversation about housing. I mean, housing is a national issue, all right? I mean, you got Republicans now Republican governors are actually taking more of a lead throughout the United States, maybe not here in Virginia, although he's doing somewhat of a good job. So it's a big issue, all right? And it's not just the missing middle. It is a big issue. So I kind of like it may make a little bit of sense.
I think if we like do enough targeted outreach to make sure that the right people are there that we want to hear from that are more marginalized groups and doing more
hard to get
those community groups.
A lot of them go to the communities, the communities, especially like that lumberyard. That's a big population for the older generation. And then in the afternoon, you have the younger generation there. So you'll hit a good target of people.
Where they are.
That would be a good location.
Otherwise, try to set up these events. Well,
I mean, you want to get public engagement, and the engagement is the workforce people that we want that are working here, living here, and having trouble finding rent or home. And it's not only home ownership, it's rent. I mean, and that's.
It sounds like you guys would be great additions to this task force to talk this through and figure out what makes the most sense. So I have my vision. That's just my vision. And I think anything that happens would be a conversation, discussion. But as far as the general idea of the task force and looking into this, do people have, thoughts for or against it? As a chunk of it, because this would require more extra meetings outside of this meeting. We really, other than homeownership, we have not had a subcommittee for two years. Or yeah, it's been a bit. And I know last year we talked about having some subcommittees, and some of the ones that I pitched, the board didn't want us to do. So, but this is one that I think would add value and hopefully spur a larger conversation in the county government about, well, if the housing commission is recommending that we move forward with these steps to get historically marginalized groups, low-income groups involved, then we can look at things like that for all of our, for transportation, for, other areas.
The way we sell it is engagement. Part of the criticism with Missing Middle, it was done during COVID and people said no one knew about it because it was Zoom or whatever. So if you have a session, preferably like during homeownership month where it's already being advertised, you're engaging the community and letting them speak on input on housing issues.
I have a question. I'm not saying these two things are mutually exclusive, but just inspired a thought in me. It is a more comprehensive issue, outreach generally, not just on housing issues, but bans, transportation, other social supports, childcare, etc. I don't know if it makes sense to have several sessions, have one focus per session, and maybe this is way beyond it, but housing could be one component of this. Maybe that's the place to start. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we can only really do housing related things. We can certainly recommend to the county board that, like, hey, this could be the start. You do one thing here on housing, you do another one on transportation or something. I think what also this fits in nicely with this is the 10-year anniversary of the Affordable Housing Master Plan and 5-year anniversary of Housing Arlington. County staff are going to be holding a number of events, but this would be a board event or an commission event, which is different than what the county's already planning. And so I think it complements what they're planning to do there and can help inform, some of the activities that are going to come out of these sessions. So, yeah, whether it gets extended to other areas is for, a board decision, but we can certainly recommend on the housing front, we think you do this.
Well, if anything, you could do a deliverable of resources that you wanted people to know that we have. And it doesn't take a lot of work. If we could put something together, you have a deliverable to hand out also.
Doing the live in Arlington fairs and we have like shop. So a lot of outreach that goes into those.
Yeah.
And it's just so difficult to get people unless you're giving out free money.
We can recommend that they give out free money.
And,
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think, again, I have faith in the county board office because they were able to pull off the 2050 thing in a very short amount of time.
Yep.
And so I'm like, if they can do that, I think they could do this, for housing, and I think this could add a lot of value. So ultimately, if we want to move forward with this task force, and then as part of the task force, an event like this, a public event, that's a discussion that we have with the board. Ultimately, they're going to decide what that looks like. We can recommend and say, like, here's the role that we want to have, and the board will just either, that sounds great, let's do that. Here's the research we're committing to it, where they'll say, sure, we can do open door Mondays with you, and we'll see who attends. But yeah, we can put our heads together, say what we think makes the most sense, and see what the board says.
I think another good thing that this subcommittee could do would be to just be like establishing these relationships with different nonprofits or organizations, and then maybe we could get like speakers from those to come in, or from like Bugata or other tenant associations to come in and explain like what are their members facing, and so just to kind of get that perspective at the commission. Pretty cool.
Definitely. Okay. The other bullet points here, like around working with staff on continuing to build out our equity framework. That's the same, one that we had last year. There's no change. Same thing, identify and disseminate best practices. No change there. Collaborate with staff to bring educational presentations before. That's something I know we talked about in December. And I think we want to develop sort of a list, like soon, as to what those are, so we can plan them out throughout the year. And then I think everything else on here is the same as last year for this particular the objective. For policy, so I made quite a few changes here. So the first one is establish of another subcommittee, specifically around affordable housing ordinance. And so this I'm calling a working group rather than a task force. So this is something that we had pitched last year, but we're told, by the board, this is not a good priority for you to focus on last year. I think sentiment has changed because the feeling was that with who is sitting in the governor's seat, that it didn't make sense for us to come up with this recommendation because the board wouldn't want to move forward with something unless they had what they considered more friendly, office holder. And there's going to be a governor election this year. And so I think they're just thinking that, okay, now it makes sense for the commission to look into making changes to our affordable housing ordinance and the enabling legislation in Virginia, and presenting that to the county board. That aligns with our fair housing plan as well, which says that the county should review and make changes to it in order to either increase the number of on-site units or increase the amount that developers pay. So the board has already established that this is a goal of the county to do it. Where we would just be trying to actually facilitate that happening. This working group, unlike the other one, would be more of a community working group that is led by the Housing Commission, but is not solely made up of Housing Commission members. So it would have represented at least one from Planning Commission, probably Tenant Landlord Commission, as well as developers, other, community advocates, affordable housing advocates. So this would be a not larger necessarily in size, but more complex undertaking. And also, like, staff is willing to provide us with briefings on the work that they've already done, but it really would be up to the county board to communicate to staff that it would be a priority for them to do anything beyond that with us, which hasn't happened thus far. So that's something that we need to do, talking to the county board about and seeing if this is something that potentially we could get more staff support for if it becomes a priority. So that was a big change. Thoughts on that working group?
A good idea as long as our bandwidth allows it.
Yeah, and this one I think is key because since I've been chair, when we see site plans come before us, like, I feel like there's a very consistent frustration of we're not getting very many affordable units, or like that's a huge development, and that's all the money that we're getting to AHIP, like, as a result of this. And I've talked to advocates who've said basically like Fairfax is getting a much better deal than we are because their state law is different. Same thing for Alexandria, and Arlington is basically getting shafted when it comes to community benefits because of the specific structure of our law on the state level, which is the same as our county ordinance. So I think looking into that and seeing at least achieving parity, but also what is that right mix that's not going to unduly sort of harm development from happening in the county, but making sure that the county and our communities benefiting in the most meaningful way.
Yeah, just as a comment, I think Alexandria, so I think it's called like A700-00 ordinance. It's pretty much structured a lot differently because Arlington, we have, our base AZ 15.5.8, and then we have our general land use plan 15.8.0, and then we also have a separate bonus density. So like, just because it's not within the base, like we get virtually, I think like 30 units a year for the past 10 years on the base, but there's a lot of negotiation that takes place outside of the ordinance that we get. So like, for example, on the RCA site, they gave, based on the AHEF contribution ordinance, is 1.5 million, but there were still another 12 units that were at 80% AMI passed away. So versus like Alexandria, they do it based off of it's a true bonus density. Like they have to do 1/3 of every gross floor area beyond their base that has to be affordable. So that's a big structural change. And then I think another thing that this commission would tie into, especially with any changes, is that we modified our office to residential, and I think that we don't. Anytime if we have a structure that could be, because like a lot of the buildings that are candidates for this are also candidates to be knocked down and we'll get affordable units. So if we, currently there's a couple that, let's say, a developer says, oh, I don't want to apply this ordinance and do all these other things. I just want to convert the building, which has some benefits because you don't, it could be less disruptive and those units could be cheaper because it could be a little bit faster to completion. But at the same time, we're losing the affordable units that we would have gotten if we were to knock it down and build a building with more density or certain other things. So I think that would be, there's a lot of things that are synergies that we need to be investigated.
Or eminent domain.
Or eminent.
No, thank you, Jason, for the level of detail that you displayed, both not just Arlington's, but Alexandria's. Thank you. Thank you for being on the commission. Yes. So yeah, this is something that I think is important. I think will add a ton of value, to have a specific recommendation that the board can take and then hopefully, take to, our, General Assembly delegation and pass into law. So the
Would
next
this
item-
include
oh,
like,
yeah,
these are zoning, not building codes and stuff like that?
not building code. This is just looking at the affordable housing ordinance. So the next one is a repeat of what we have currently, in in the 2024 plan around monitoring implementation of the regional fair housing plan. I think today was a great step at that, and pushing forward with the fair housing assistance program recommendation. But there's definitely more to do. As we heard, that we're gonna hopefully get the testing results next month. And I think there will be additional advocacy or advising, not supposed to be advocates on commissions, that we can do around next steps once we get those results. So the next one, are on that article, consideration of alternative implementation of the enhanced housing option zoning amendments. So I know the commission got the NAACP letter around changes that they believe could be made to the expanded housing options, or is it, expanded, enhanced housing options ordinance to comply with the judge's ruling while it's under appeal. So as I said in December, that is something, if the commission would like us to look into that, we can. Thoughts?
I could see how it could become sort of like a suck on our time. But, and because there might be a lot of controversy around it, but yeah.
Well, it depends on who you talk to, because obviously the NAACP thinks that there is a lot that can be done. But
Yeah, I did look at one thing I didn't realize before is the timeframe, because I think the county released the EHR report that came out, but because of the timeline with the appeals and things like it, I was thinking, oh, it's could be maybe a year or whatever, whatever. This could be a multi-year sort of effort, and based off of the letter that the commission got, I think if it's we took already, it's like how many years from the initial 6, and then it's like we gotta wait. Are we gonna have to wait till the Supreme Court issues Virginia issues a ruling on this to I think that's good. The ideal was like within 5 years we'd have all this data and all this sort of thing. But like if we have to wait for delayed like another 5 years, and then we have to wait another 5 years before making that's like a decade to do.
Yeah, I guess the question is, would the board do anything if we recommend it? I know they said that they won't, but or they just to make a statement if
I mean, Maureen, do you have any?
I'm here to be advised by a commission that advises the board. I think we are all having conversations and weighing the timeline question, the community engagement question, the legal questions, and doing the best we can. I think to me, it's a question of how you want to spend your time. I think to Katie's point, if I could come up with many recommendations that do not elicit any change in the situation. Maybe not, maybe. And I wouldn't want people to spend weeks and months and, hours of their life putting a lot into something that, for perhaps legal or other conflicting reasons, could not go anywhere.
So my sort of
That was
thinking, thank you, Maureen. My sort of thinking on this is I could see it being worth an agenda item, like, topic for us to consider, assuming that we could get the right speakers to present the various sides and like what the options are, like even for us to consider and recommend to the board. But yeah, I mean, I don't think doing a study, which apparently we were considering last month, makes a lot of sense for this. And I don't think like a subcommittee makes a lot of sense, but I also recognize that like it's a very big topic in the county, and we are the housing commission. I think it could make sense to have this be something that we do talk about at a meeting, as long as we feel like, again, we could get the right speakers to talk about sort of options, because I don't think we're going to get the county attorney to come and talk to us about like all the legal options. And I don't think it does. Yeah, it does. I don't think staff is probably going to come and brief us on like what their thoughts are on this. Like, I think any presentation would have to be from outside the county. And I would question how much value that necessarily would have, if there's a key side of it, which is the county, that we wouldn't really be hearing from because they're not going to provide any detailed information to us, which is the sense that I've been getting since the court ruling came down.
Is there any way we could tie this into the engagement part?
So just have a missing middle of it? No.
No, not missing, it would be like an agenda item.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine if we do an event like that, yeah, we talk about EHO, we talk about missing middle, because that is, I don't think we should pretend that that doesn't exist in our community. I think it's important as one of many things that we talk about. And which I also think that's where it fits in the priority, list of all things housing in the county. It is one of many things that should be considered, and is of importance, but there are certainly many other things that are important as well. So we can keep it on here and not have it be a priority for us to look into, but if someone on the commission wants to figure out like who are the right speakers to have to come talk to this, I'm more than happy to entertain that, because like I said, it's an important topic. It's on a lot of people's minds. So I don't think we should just shy away from it on the Housing Commission, but it is not my most pressing item to look at this year.
I think, perhaps just table it, just see, keep it there and
Keep
see
it there.
see what happens. And then, as we get more information, like we can act, because it's like right now it's the cone of uncertainty will decrease as we advance.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. The next one, examine the county's definition of family and zone ordinance and ability for more than or unrelated individuals to live together. So this one in part came from the Fair Housing Plan, as well as I think the county is planning to study this anyways. And I don't know what the study is called, but staff told us that there is a study that's going to happen more comprehensively on the zoning ordinance, but I didn't just guess. Do you know what that's called by any chance?
I don't know I don't know a specific name, but I do know that it was in tier 2 of the work plan this year, and I believe it is one of the things.
We said this year, 2025 or?
As in calendar year 2024. And we will go over their new work plan during budget cycle.
How does this fit in with the group home thing that the county just approved?
It was related, so that's when they brought it up to us, is they said that separately from the recovery residences, which the board, passed that change. Solely because of our letter, of course, yeah. They said that they were going to look at this issue completely separate from recovery residents, just in general, should we lower the cap on the number of unrelated people who live together in Arlington? And it sounded like we had a number of people on the commission who would be in favor of that. And I think that, yeah, that's something that we want to engage with staff.
I would say for reference, Alexandria recently amended their ordinance such that the only restriction on the number of people in a dwelling is the building code, health
Right,
code,
yeah, that's
safety.
what it should be,
And-
bedroom size bathroom.
Right, that like, you know, you can only have X number of people per square foot or, you know, per bedroom. And that's one way to approach it. You could also change the number from 4 to 8 or 6, or, you know, there are different ways to approach it. So that's why the study is part of the conversation. But it, you know, we know that as roommatedom continues to increase and
Right.
non-traditional families as well continue to increase and expand, and we have a need for more intergenerational housing as well. The kind of traditional nuclear family structure is not as
And
typical.
co-buying is now a big thing, so I think this thing makes sense.
Okay. The next one I added, because we didn't actually have anything in here previously about legislative priorities. So I thought it made sense to have a bullet point, and typically our legislative priorities are focused on protecting tenant rights, increasing housing, and promoting fair housing. So I figured that was safe to include those. Then I also don't think we had anything in there about our budget recommendations. So I added that for the FY26 budget. Then again, focus on protecting affordable housing and homelessness programs and services, studying rent stabilization consistent with the resolution we passed, then expanding production. I think that encompasses what we've already talked about. Next one is a carryover from 2024 about monitoring what's happening at Barcroft. Next one, you know, again, with the homeownership study recommendation, see what happens. That's also carryover. So is the next one with the county's eviction prevention efforts. There were some changes with this next one to examine ways to increase the supply of caps and market rate affordable housing. We split this out into caps and market rate instead of just saying affordable rental housing. The first sub bullet is the same. The second one is new. This one, Jason, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this one I know is about modifications in the Virginia Uniform Statewide Building Code. And there's a couple aspects, like there's the main two that come to my mind is this is first with like office to conversions to have different giving building code flexibility, so you can have certain rooms be, you have to have certain code, which sometimes you know may not be in terms of windows and light and other sort of things, and that could help really or like co-living, you know, where you have like a you know there's some building code restrictions in that, and then the other big one that comes to my mind is a single stair on low rise buildings, which is you know there was a report that was put out by the Virginia housing about this. There was a stakeholder task force that was assembled, and firefighters, from architects, all that sort of thing. And there's still multiple avenues on the table for the next code that could go into force 3 years from now, because we just adopted the previous 3 years one. And there's some options, you know, because right now if you have anything 3 stories above the ground plane, you got to have a second stair. So this, I think, will be able to unlock a lot of, you know, looking around the country and say like, okay, how can we get more CAFs? Well, I think with the building code and certain other modifications with the zoning and setbacks, height, sort of thing, I really do believe we can do a 60% AMI without any subsidy, which will enable us to do 30%, which I think right now we have only like about 30 or something, or couple hundred, that's it, like 100 caps at 30% AMI. So this could be a really great avenue, a lot of different sites and opportunities. I think that would not be going to force this year, but over this next building code cycle and beyond.
Jason, are you thinking that this would be sort of part of our legislative priorities, since it's kind of state level versus county specific, or just recommending to the board that they work with the state to,
Yeah,
try to make these changes?
it could be, and it also could be based on what's happening is to prepare in advance. So like, let's say, right now, if there was, say, I would say, like, we'd want to have a ordinance ready, like within, like, let's say the state says, okay, you can allow 4-story buildings, single stairs. Like, I think by that time we'd want to say, okay, where do we allow these buildings to be? Is this, of course, this does tie into EHO because it's essentially being expanding, EHO, but there's some aspects to that, and then as well as the other aspect with co-living things that I'm not sure details on that, but that is, I think, something perhaps more near term, especially with office to residential conversions. That's super hot topic. Like even now, like we could do an office conversion, and based on our current building code, it'll have to be like 1 bedrooms in a certain way. Versus if we have the new building code, now we can really do even more affordable and split it up even better. So which will enable like more. So like that's a thing too as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would just be, Maureen, we would make a recommendation to you all to pursue a particular action. I guess it's sort of lobbying, even it's lobbying state agencies versus like the legislature.
Studies to the board, not
Okay.
stairs.
The next item, this was tweaked to just add transportation as one of the, I think, Jason, you'd made tweaks to this one. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, can I just, I think, I think this is a really great like synergy, and I know the one thing that the transportation master plan that's coming up, a big thrust of it is, within transportation, there's all sorts of priorities, and I think that that this new effort is going to try to be like, okay, we're going to decide what is the actual priority versus just saying, this mode. And I think for housing, between our commission, between E2, transportation, all these sort of other all these commissions, they sometimes can be out of sync in terms of like priority per se, in terms of like, okay, we want super affordable. Oh no, we want like 100%, green building is like, and I think there's a way to meld it together and to get to achieve all these visions, but sometimes it's not as in sync. And I think that it's important that when we think about like built environment and achieving our priorities, like going green, reducing emissions, like transportation, all these other the commissions, it's got to be trying to help develop a shared understanding of where we want to be. So that's why I just added transportation, because I think transportation housing goes, especially when they're doing this process, that's going to be really need to sink in and really understand, like, really, how are we going to increase bus routes or this and that, because that affects housing and what sort of housing we're going to build, and who's it going to be for, and like, that goes all together. So that's why.
Would this include transit-oriented development?
Oh yeah. So.
Then the next one was added, I think, because it came up at our December meeting. Looking for opportunities for climate resilience funding, affordable housing properties. And then the next few bullets came from, the previous overall objective around CAP strategies, making sure that the quality of our CAP properties is high.
Say something about the green one again.
Uh-huh.
Just because I know we had that presentation. I forget it was November or December about the.
I think December.
Yeah, and then I think that was a really great discussion, and I know Zach and I, Elizabeth and Nikki had also been in touch with the C2E2 folks. So I think it'd be great if we could continue to stay in touch with them, and then potentially invite that AIR team back before they're gonna send it to the county, so that maybe we could do a letter on it.
Yeah, no, I think I think that makes sense. I know we talked about doing that, at the meeting in December, having them come back when they're ready to present to the board so that we can make a final recommendation. And I think that goes in collaboration, you know, we have the groups that. With field trips, Jason, I think you had particular interest in, the Marbella, the Bridge District Phase 1 and the Stacks Phase 1.
I was speak, so I just picked these, I think these are kind of representative of different focus areas, Marbella, obviously large CAF property. I think that's a great example of, we have so much garden style housing. How does modernize this and create, what does this look like there? So I think that's a good example. Bridge District, I think, is a really great example in Anacostia, DC, and because this is probably one of the most greenest buildings that is being built out. It's going to be not this phase, but the second phase is going to be mass timber and all sorts of things. So I think this will be a very good one to see in terms of what we can push the limits to build. And then Stacks is, I think, a really great high density development that I think is a really kind of interesting model because of just how the buildings interact there and how they've kind of made that the placemaking and
Where's that?
It's in Buzzard Point on the just south of Audi Field.
I don't know where that is. Where though?
Southeast DC, sorry.
It's ballpark. Buzzards Point used to be a slum. Now it's a high-end area.
Is that a sports team?
That is the women's soccer team who
I don't-
was in the finals of the national.
Yeah.
I don't do sports.
Hot area.
Uh,
Got good restaurants there too.
Go team.
Whoever's winning, that's fine.
Yes.
I'm Trinity.
Okay.
It's a big deal.
That's great. So for the field trips then, I guess we can do field trips out of Arlington, right?
So the problem with field trips is anytime more than two of you are together, it's a public meeting, so that would, that is a question.
Go away.
I
if we're
don't
not-
know the answer to that.
It does not.
No way.
That's not enough.
I'm not a lawyer.
So a field trip would be, it would have to
publicly notice.
include public notice, and then it'd have to be, there would have to be room to include everyone that did sign up, and we would have to be transporting them. So there would be some logistics with
We have to
it.
transport.
I don't know that
If-
is, because the board, for example, we all went to the Association of Counties State Conference in Southwest Virginia,
I got
far
that
away,
invite.
4 hours away. We publicly noticed it because we would be all together, but I don't know that we had a requirement to drive everyone from.
Yeah, that's,
I think it's just that if they were to inquire, and the other thing is that you, at least for us, and I will say that, I don't know I'm not a lawyer either, the differences between our requirements and commission requirements. But, it was just made very clear that
I feel like yours should be more stringent.
I hope so, but, that no official votes or actions would take place during the period of the public meeting.
Yeah.
And so, it's.
so why don't we do it to coincide, your department did that tour this summer?
So yeah, they do an affordable housing bus tour during Affordable Housing Month, so in October of every year.
Yeah, coordinate it with that.
Yeah, I mean, Marbella will absolutely be one that's featured. It's gonna be opening this year, so that will be one that we would love to feature on that tour in October.
Can we get CPC to get a bus and take us all to these 3 places? Okay, is that a thing that we can even have?
So that is what we do for the Affordable Housing Month bus tour. I do think, yeah,
Great.
there is an opportunity to expand that to also include mission, and I do know we did have to cap the number that we were.
Yeah, but the bus was empty.
The bus was only so big, but then only a third of the people showed up. But yeah, happy to.
So it sounds like we can figure something out. I know we've talked about field trips for several years. We have not done that, but this year, this will be different. But But yeah, I'm fine with including this as a, you know, as an objective. Okay, and then collaboration has not really changed. We still have SITSAC, Tenant Landlord Commission, Rights Commission, Planning Commission, Disability Advisory Commission, C2E2, which I think we had last year, Commission on Aging. We added Transportation Commission. We don't have a liaison for, and I don't know if people think we should have a liaison to the Transportation Commission. And then I added the HALRD, which we have Joe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
can
I'm
you
in-
give me the contact information?
So I'm talking with the historic preservation
Okay.
staff on that right
Just let me
now, and I think they're also looking to have someone in a similar role for,
Come to our meetings.
possibly be an equal, maybe not for all meetings, but where the topics
We talk about
intersect.
old buildings, okay?
But yeah,
Okay.
I'm working with the historic preservation staff.
Okay. Sounds good. And then, same as last year, affordable housing advisory bodies, nearby jurisdictions, including Alexandria and Fairfax. So Alexandria, I do talk to their chair at least once a year, their legislative priority. Fairfax, I've been unable to make contact. But I can try again this year and see. And then for our schedule, this is pretty consistent with last year. So at this meeting, fair housing enforcement briefing, review and approve the annual report, which we already did. I have the work plan set for next month, but we can do that this month. Like approve it. I think last year it just took us 2 meetings to finalize things. We'll do our budget recommendations in March, general assembly legislative priorities in September. And then I would like to have a fair housing plan status briefing this year. And what I sent out to you all, this spreadsheet. So I went through the fair housing plan and I copied each of the 76 goals and sub goals into a spreadsheet because the presentation that we got from staff in November, I felt like left off a lot of things. They kind of talked about some highlights, but there's a whole lot of stuff that I don't feel like I have an understanding of what progress, if any, we've made on it. And I talked to Ann Benicia about if I put this together and I fill in what I think the status is for the ones that I think I know, can I send it to staff and have you all update that? And she said yes. So that's what I did. I just haven't filled in any of the status items yet, but we learned a little bit more from Office of the Reds. Well, they said they hadn't made any progress in implementing any of the fair housing plan, but TBD. We can try to update that, but I want to get a better sense of where things are and so we know where we should be pushing them on things. And then homelessness service plan implementation briefing. I think that's really critical this year. We need to know how things are going. Hopefully after a successful budget advocacy, campaign, have long-term strategies, and then a home ownership report, seeing how implementation is going this year. So those are the key things. Obviously, some of them don't have dates because it really will depend on when staff is ready to come and speak with us. And then lastly, we just have the county board meetings that we need people to sign up for. I'll send out a sign up genus again so that we can do that. So thanks everyone last year who participated in that so that we had full participation at all the county board meetings. We had items to talk about. And that is the draft plan. Are there any? Yes. Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so the thing that I sent you, I think it would probably, and it has to do with rental housing, voucher utilization, and the concept of a universal rental application, but it's basically, and I posted on LinkedIn, and Maureen, I just tagged you like in honor of your rental housing platform.
Can you like it, please?
But I think, you don't have to, whatever.
Not a big LinkedIner, but I'll
LinkedIn,
take a
oh,
look.
LinkedIn is
The new
great.
Facebook.
LinkedIn is great.
TikTok, I've heard.
Yeah. So on page 3, the bullet, fifth bullet where you have the 3 sub bullets, maybe a 4th sub bullet, just talking about, I gave you the content, you could just maybe steal from here and talk about voucher utilization, Urban Institute. That's what I just posted on LinkedIn. They just issued a report on voucher utilization, et cetera. So I tagged on to that. I'll send it to everyone. I'll send it to, give it to Alex to share. And if you just capture the essence of that in a 4th sub bullet under affordable rental housing in the county, including, and that would be a 4th bullet.
Okay.
All right.
Other changes, additions, deletions. This is more than we can do in a year. This is aspirational.
It looks good.
But yeah, I mean, I think I don't know how many other people look at this throughout the year. It is helpful for me as chair when I'm trying to think about what should I try to push for the agenda, next when we're not full of site plans and other things. Coming back to this is really helpful for me.
You want to go ahead and approve it?
Yeah, I mean, if people are no more edits or changes to it. Okay.
Make a motion that we approve the annual work plan for 2025 as discussed and as amended.
Thank you. Let's do a quick roll call. Commissioner Macbeth votes yes. Commissioner Service. Commissioner Wenger.
Yeah.
Commissioner Lennick.
Yes.
Commissioner Mitrone.
Yes.
Commissioner Ross.
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman. Is he gone? Okay. Commissioner Montgomery.
Yes.
Commissioner McGilvray.
Yes.
Great, and it passes unanimously. Thank you. So I will make the changes and also update like the one highlighted. And then send out the sign up to Enos so that I can complete this kind of thing. And fill in the members so that by the February complete. Do we have someone who wants to do the county board meeting next week?
But we actually know items.
We'll have the fair housing thing that we just passed, right?
So that won't be on the county board agenda itself, because it doesn't have an item. So there won't be.
Is this public comment? Or like, how do we?
You
could do a
You
public
could
comment.
speak during public comment, but only like proposals with staff recommendations that have board reports attached to them are on the county board agenda. So it might be a public comment, might be best, but I can also ask that question. What's the most?
Didn't we do that for the rent stabilization?
Yeah, that is,
Public comment.
yeah, and then we had someone speak on the item itself. That was after that. Yeah. Did for that.
Okay.
I know that at some point we'll get report of fair housing findings. Yes, and
That would be an agenda item.
not necessarily, but I could do a board member report and invite, Human Rights Office and Housing Commission and others to come speak if a larger venue is desired. There are ways to get to that, but probably not at the January.
Yeah. So I will say that one thing the HUD representative said is it's better to do this sooner rather than later, given uncertainties with the next administration and not knowing where things will go. So she was recommending if this is the path that the county wanted to take to move quick.
But did you say this to have her send it, staff send it first, her to review?
She wants to look at.
Just
So-
like some things.
Well, the ordinance is public.
As I said, it's already could be good.
Yes. Well, that's the thing, like, so what I heard from Office of Human Rights is the focus is employment discrimination, not fair housing. And what I think our letter will hopefully do is spur the board to tell the manager that this is a priority and the Office of Human Rights should focus on becoming a fair housing assistance program and take the necessary steps to do that. I don't know that that's gonna happen without the board. You know, unless people heard something different today, I feel like I did not hear that today, that this was a key focus for them, is to move in this direction. Because there were other things that she had said were needed that I felt like they were kind of subtly pushing back on. I was like, oh, we don't really need separate fair housing investigators. Yeah, I think without the board saying this is important and you need to do this, I don't know that it's gonna start. So
I missed that part. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I just don't know.
It's all recorded. You can go back.
I-
Yeah. I think, they're not gonna cover that. I think doing, in my view, like, we're gonna send the letter obviously next week. But I think having it at public comment like now, I would prefer, like, rather than waiting. I think I'm gonna be at the meeting anyways for the LGBTQ plus. Hopefully the resolution is
Well,
happening.
remind that you can only speak on one public comment topic.
Yeah, well, so, yeah, needless to say, I may not be able to speak. But is someone else able to attend that meeting and speak?
The 18th.
The 25th.
It's, yeah.
It's not this Saturday.
And we are no longer starting at 8:30 a.m., but 9:30 a.m.
Oh, wow.
I think it's 9:30. So an extra hour of sleep or preparation, whichever is.
We don't have any takers.
I cannot.
What day is it?
I can do
That's
it.
25th. The 20th.
I can do it. Nobody else can.
Okay.
It's just public comment, right? Which is sort of the beginning. Yeah, I can do it.
Yeah, Katie, I'll put you down for now and figure out if something.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, cool. Great. So the next set of development updates, and I know we're over time.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. Okay, so we have two development updates. The first one is another Barcroft related one. So in January, the county board will consider an RTA to amend the form-based code and neighborhood form-based code, general land use plan map and booklet, the master transportation plan map, and that would all collectively implement the Barcroft Master Financing and Development Plan and associated policy updates. That was approved by the county board in July 24, or acted upon then. So if it is advertised in January, then in February, the county board will consider all the actions listed above, as well as the first 100% affordable new construction use permit building, which will include 110 CAFs. And that is basically the first new construction building coming out of Barcroft. It will demolish 13 existing units, but at 110, 26 of those are 1 bedrooms, 69 2 bedrooms, and 15 3 bedrooms. And it will be an earth backfill. So those are the next couple updates that you'll see Barcroft going to the county board, and then we can also talk about Housing Commission for Barcroft use permit. And then the second update I have is an IDA update. So both Goodwill and Crystal House 3 are going to be going to the Industrial Development Authority meeting next week to basically try to get their bonds or their tax exempt financing for the 4% sides of their hybrid LIHTC projects. So there's an IDA meeting next week for the IDA to approve that. And then those will also be on the county board agenda on the 25th for the county board to basically sign off on the IDA bonds. So you will also see some Goodwill and Crystal House items on the county board agenda in January as well, but that's what that is. Other than that, we do have a few meetings that we could use people for. The River House one, I know it says October 24th, but actually there was one tonight on that.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
It
And
might still be going on.
but Clarendon Square is and River House are two that if anyone would like to be the rep for those two, let me know. But yeah, that's it for development updates.
The 20 We have 3 different. Actually, I think I can attend that. But I'll let you know. So do we need someone for Clarendon Square?
Yeah, we don't currently have anyone. It is next
Any
Thursday.
volunteers?
Send it out.
Yeah, I can do it. The 23rd is open for me right
Okay.
now.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else that?
You can put me down for the River House.
River House? Okay. Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure when, but
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
Is that for development? Yeah, okay. I don't think we have subcommittee updates.
I did go to the